Booker froze as the officer's flashlight hit his face. His janitor's badge still clipped to his shirt, but the whiteboard behind him was covered in equations even the professor couldn't solve. "Step away from the board," the cop barked, hand on his holster. "I work here," Booker said softly. "Not tonight, you don't," came the reply. As security swarmed in. And in that moment, the world decided a black man solving math was a crime. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. The campus was a ghost town after dark. Crisp autumn winds rattled the old windows of Langston Hall, whispering through cracks like forgotten voices. It was well past midnight, and the corridors of the mathematics department lay silent, save for the low hum of fluorescent lights and the distant squeak of rubber soles against polished tile. Most had gone home. Students, professors, even the security guards had clocked out mentally, letting routine rule their patrols. But Booker Lyles was still there. As always, a lean man with a slow, measured gait. Booker pushed a yellow janitor's cart down the West Wing hallway, his Navy work uniform marked with stains that told their own stories. Eraser dust, old coffee spills, traces of chemical cleaner, on his chest a faded embroidered patch. Booker, facilities. No one ever called him by name. Not really. Students would nod at him with mechanical politeness, or ignore him altogether. Professors occasionally thanked him for cleaning their offices, but never asked about his life. To them, he was background. Necessary. Invisible. A functional shadow. But Booker noticed everything. He knew which classrooms had heaters that never worked, which faculty left coffee rings on their desks, which night shift guard liked to nap in the boiler room. More importantly, he knew when the math department updated its lecture schedules. He planned his shifts around it. There was one class, Advanced Applied Mathematics 4, that always ended at 10 p.m. And every Thursday after that final bell rang, Booker waited precisely 25 minutes, then entered room 4. That night was no different. Booker unlocked the heavy classroom door and wheeled in his cart. The room was warm, the air stale with the scent of dry erase markers and chalk dust. He glanced around, rows of empty desks, a half-eaten granola bar on the podium, a forgotten backpack in the corner, standard leftovers. He closed the door behind him, not locking it. He never locked it, but just enough to feel alone, safe. And then, slowly, reverently, he walked to the whiteboard. Most nights he erased it. It was part of his job. But on Thursdays he did something else first. From the inner pocket of his janitor jacket, Booker pulled out a folded sheet of paper, creased, ink smudged, covered in dense mathematical notation. Notes he had scribbled at home, after poring over borrowed textbooks and online lectures on a second-hand laptop. Notes no one else had seen. He took a deep breath. Then, with a black Expo marker in hand, he began to write. At first his strokes were cautious. Equations flowed line by line. He wrote in silence, eyes scanning left to right, recalculating in real time. His movements grew bolder with each symbol. What started as equations became intricate patterns, proofs, derivations, numeric bridges connecting abstraction to logic. The whiteboard became a universe. He stepped back, considered, then added one more line. And suddenly, the answer appeared. Booker exhaled, his chest rising with a slow, almost emotional release. It wasn't just math, it was language. His language, the only place in the world where he wasn't judged by skin or speech or salary, only by whether the numbers held up. The answer held. Behind him the hallway creaked. Booker turned instinctively but saw nothing. He was used to the building groaning at night. Still, something felt different. He capped the marker, preparing to wipe the board clean like always. Erase the evidence, silence the part of him that still believed he belonged in places he was told he didn't. But before he could reach for the eraser, the classroom door opened. He froze. Dr. Elliot Grant stepped in. A white man in his late 50s with silvering hair and horn-rimmed glasses. Dr. Grant was the department chair, known for his rigid standards, intellectual arrogance, and obsessive control over his research. He wasn't supposed to be there. Not at that hour. He narrowed his eyes as they locked on Booker. Then his gaze drifted to the board. "Did you write that?" he asked. Voice cool and level. Booker said nothing. He glanced at the floor, then back at the board, then at Dr. Grant. He could deny it, say he was just cleaning, blame a student, pretend, but he didn't. Dr. Grant stepped forward slowly, his shoes clicking against the tile. His eyes flicked across the board, expression unreadable. He paused mid-equation, then retraced a proof line by line. "Where did you get this?" Still Booker didn't speak. Dr. Grant turned to him, brows furrowed, a mix of suspicion and something else behind his stare. Not admiration, not yet. More like discomfort. Disruption. Booker finally cleared his throat. "I just solved it." The silence between them was a rope pulled taut. Dr. Grant stared again at the board, then back at Booker, a janitor, a black man with a mop bucket and calloused hands, saying he solved a problem the senior class had struggled with all semester. "Do you even understand what you wrote?" he asked, quieter this time. Booker didn't answer. He didn't need to. The work answered for him. Grant walked closer to the board. His face changed. The look of intellectual superiority faded. Now it was something else.
Recognition.
His fingers traced a section of the equation, slowing near a specific proof. This isn't from our curriculum," he muttered. "This comes from something else. This is advanced." Booker didn't move. "Where did you study?" Grant asked, trying to mask his confusion with control. Still silence. He stared harder. "Answer me. Where did you learn this?" Booker finally replied, voice even, calm. "From the same place you forgot to look." Dr. Grant blinked. It was the first moment he truly saw Booker. Not as a janitor, not as background noise, but as a threat. Booker picked up his eraser. "I'll clean it," he said, lifting his arm. Dr. Grant grabbed his wrist. "No, don't." His voice had changed. Not commanding, not angry, just afraid. And that's when Booker realized something important. The problem he solved wasn't just academic. It was ownership. Of space. Of intellect. Of identity. The board still glowed under fluorescent lights, a battlefield of symbols and logic. And then, as if the air itself shifted, Dr. Grant stepped even closer, squinting at the board, stunned. The handwriting, it wasn't his. The night felt heavier after Dr. Grant left the classroom. Booker stood still for a long time, his hand trembling slightly. As he held the marker, the air carried a faint echo of footsteps fading down the hall, but their sound lingered in his mind like the tick of an old clock, reminding him that time hadn't been kind. He looked at the whiteboard once more, covered with symbols that could change how the world saw him, if the world ever cared enough to look. He knew he should wipe it clean. He always did. The equations weren't supposed to stay, neither were his dreams. But something stopped him. For the first time in years, someone saw him, not as a cleaner, not as a background figure, but as something dangerous, and that terrified him more than invisibility ever had. He pressed the eraser to the board, and began to wipe, the black ink smearing into gray fog. With every stroke he felt like he was erasing a piece of himself. A younger version of Booker, who once believed brilliance could save him. That version was gone, or so he thought. Because before the janitor uniform, before Langston College's empty corridors, Booker Lyles had worn a Harvard sweatshirt. He'd been a prodigy, the kind of student professors used as an example of what potential looks like. Born and raised in Detroit's East Side, Booker had grown up solving puzzles his mother couldn't afford to buy. He scribbled equations on grocery bags, chalked formulas on the back wall of an abandoned church, and read physics books from the library 2 stops away by bus. By 17, he was offered a full scholarship to Harvard. The local paper called him the math miracle from Motown. His mother cried the day he left, tears of pride, not sadness. "You'll make them see, baby," she'd told him. "They can't ignore a mind like yours." But they did. At Harvard, Booker was the only black student in his department. He was used to being underestimated, but this was different. Every room reminded him he was an exception, an anomaly tolerated for diversity's sake. His classmates spoke around him, not to him. Professors looked surprised when he aced every exam. Some stopped hiding their irritation altogether. When he solved a centuries-old unsolved proof during his sophomore year, a problem his advisor Dr. Calder had spent years publishing papers on, his name was omitted from the department's submission. The journal article listed only Calder's name. Booker's proof was buried beneath a single line of acknowledgement. "Special thanks to research assistant BL." That was the first theft. The second would destroy his career. In his senior year, Booker was accused of cheating. A plagiarism scandal, involving his thesis, a work he'd spent 2 years crafting, swept through the department. Pages were said to match a professor's unpublished work. He tried to prove it was his, but the evidence was gone. His laptop had been confiscated for review and returned days later, with key files missing. Harvard's disciplinary board called it inconclusive misconduct. They didn't expel him, but they revoked his scholarship, voided his research, and barred him from graduate programs. The shame crushed his mother. The story spread fast. Black prodigy fakes research. Caught lying. She stopped answering neighbors' questions. Booker stopped answering anyone's. He left Cambridge with a single box of notebooks and a lifetime of bitterness. Years passed. He worked odd jobs, slept in his car, took custodial shifts at night, and tutoring gigs in the day. He tried to publish on his own, anonymous submissions under pseudonyms, but no journal touched them. The industry didn't reward invisible men. Langston College wasn't his first janitorial job, but it was the first place that had a math department worth looking at. So he stayed, quietly, patiently, watching. Every night after cleaning classrooms, he would linger, taking pictures of problem sets on the board, solving them in secret notebooks, leaving the answers unseen. The equations were his private rebellion, his way of saying, I still exist. But after Dr. Grant's visit, that secret was broken. Booker couldn't sleep that night. He sat in his tiny one-room apartment, surrounded by old notebooks stacked like fragile towers, pages filled with symbols, ideas, unproven theorems, and fragments of his stolen thesis. He looked at the Harvard sweatshirt hanging on the back of his chair, its red faded to dull maroon, and felt the familiar ache of memory. He poured himself a cup of cheap coffee and opened his oldest notebook. On the first page, in messy handwriting, were the words, "No one can erase the truth if you remember it." It had been his mother's handwriting. He'd written those words down the night she died, 2 years after the scandal. A heart attack, they said. But Booker knew the stress had eaten her alive. She believed her son had been wronged, but she never saw him redeemed. That grief had turned into fuel. Now, with Dr. Grant's reaction burned into his mind, Booker sensed something brewing. A door that had long been closed might have cracked open, but through it came danger, not light, because Grant had recognized the work, not just the math, but the signature. It wasn't the first time he'd seen those equations. The next day at Langston, whispers floated through the faculty hall. Dr. Grant had been seen pacing his office late into the night, talking on the phone. Booker overheard snippets while emptying trash bins near the conference room. He's been here for years, you're telling me no one noticed? No, I'm not sure what he knows yet. Yes, I'll handle it quietly. Booker pretended not to hear, but his pulse quickened. That morning, he found a notice in his locker. Mandatory HR meeting. He'd seen that phrase before. It rarely meant good news. The rest of the day dragged on. Every time he passed a professor, he caught the brief flicker of discomfort in their eyes. The same look he'd seen at Harvard, just before they stripped him of everything. When 5 o'clock came, Booker walked into the HR office. The room was empty, except for a single folder on the desk, his name printed neatly on the tab. He reached for it. Inside, his stomach twisted. Copies of his old academic record. Harvard transcripts. Newspaper clippings. Even the disciplinary report from the plagiarism case. Someone had dug into his past. And at the bottom of the folder, a printout of the whiteboard photo from the night before. The caption read, "Unauthorized access to classroom property." Booker sank into the chair, the paper trembling in his hand. It wasn't enough that they'd stolen his mind once. They were preparing to bury him again. But as he looked closer at the photo, something strange caught his eye. The shot had been taken from a high corner, one of the classroom's security cameras. Yet the angle revealed not just the board, but a faint reflection in the window behind him. A figure in the hall, watching, not Dr. Grant. Someone else. He stared harder, zooming in on the blurred outline. It was tall, slender, and dressed in a coat he recognized, navy blue with brass buttons. Dean Whitmore, the university's highest-ranking official. Booker's throat tightened. What was the dean doing there at midnight? He folded the papers back into the folder and left the office quietly, his footsteps echoing down the corridor. Outside, the sun was setting, the orange light painting the building in a dull glow. The board. The camera. The dean. Something wasn't right. For the first time since Harvard, the puzzle wasn't on paper, it was happening around him. And Booker Lyles had learned one thing from a lifetime of being underestimated. When people start digging up your past, they're afraid of your future. He walked back into room 4B that night, heart pounding with defiance. The board had been wiped clean, but he knew every line by memory. He picked up the marker again, This time he wrote faster, angrier, freer. Each equation became a confession, a reclamation, a resurrection of what they'd tried to erase. He didn't hear the door open behind him. He didn't hear the quiet footsteps enter. He was too deep inside the rhythm of numbers when a cold voice broke the silence. Who solved this? Booker froze. The marker slipped from his hand, clattering to the floor. He turned and saw the one person he never expected to be there, standing in the shadows at the doorway, eyes locked on the board. The dean, Dr. Elliot Grant, sat alone in his office, staring at the empty whiteboard across the room. It had been 2 days since the encounter. 2 days since he stepped into room 4B and saw equations more elegant and precise than anything he'd written in years. Equations not created by a student or a guest lecturer, but by the college janitor. And not just any janitor. Booker Lyles. The name clung to his mind like a splinter. Grant had reviewed the security footage at least 10 times since that night. The silent image of Booker, marker in hand, moving with purpose and poise, replayed over and over. He wasn't guessing. He wasn't copying. He was creating. There was no mistaking it. The man had talent, and it terrified him. Dr. Grant was no fool. He had built his career on knowing when to claim, when to distance, when to align. In academia, credit was currency. Reputation meant everything. And Booker's work? It wasn't just impressive. It was familiar. Grant recognized patterns and methods he had dismissed years ago. Proof paths that mirrored ones he'd once critiqued in academic circles. They were precise, bold, unafraid of breaking traditional constructs. He had seen this style before long ago in a thesis that mysteriously vanished from peer review channels. Now he knew why. He dug deeper. His private research led him back to a 2009 Harvard archive. A withdrawn thesis submission. Author Booker Lyles. Title Abstract Probabilistic Geometry and Quantum Flow. Grant remembered hearing rumors about a promising black student at Harvard around that time. Brilliant, but controversial. The whispers were vague, tinged with academic elitism and racial bias, plagiarism, misconduct. Something about a missing advisor's manuscript. He hadn't paid much attention then. But now, with Booker in front of him again, not as a student but a janitor, Grant felt the icy prickle of unease down his spine. The academic world was brutal. There was no space for humility. Everyone was hungry, for tenure, for funding, for recognition. Grant had spent 30 years climbing, publishing, presenting, chairing panels. He couldn't afford a blemish. Not at his age. Not now. So what was he supposed to do? Acknowledge that the man mopping floors had outshone him? Openly support a former Harvard exile who might expose systemic theft and negligence? Or quietly distance himself? Protect his career, and pretend the equations never happened? There were risks on both sides. If he supported Booker, the media would feast. White professor discovers genius black janitor. But not as a celebration. No, it would quickly become an indictment. Why hadn't he mentored him? Why was Booker in overalls instead of on a research team? Why had the system let this brilliance rot? Grant would be asked hard questions. Questions that might uncover what academia didn't want exposed. Its indifference to black minds unless they could be sanitized or controlled. But if he suppressed it, if he stayed silent, he could continue untouched, untarnished. The dean would back him. The faculty would sigh in relief. No headlines, no controversy. The equations would disappear with the next board wipe. It was safer, cleaner, but wrong. Grant sipped his bourbon slowly, trying to still the war raging in his chest. He wasn't a cruel man. At least, he didn't think so. But he had made compromises before. Quiet ones. He had passed over more qualified black candidates for research spots, telling himself they lacked polish. He had nodded along when colleagues dismissed black scholarship as activist math. He had never stood in the way of racism, but he had never stood against it either. Neutrality was his mask. He wore it well, until now. Booker's presence shattered that mask. The equations refused to be ignored. They had weight. They demanded acknowledgement. But acknowledgement had consequences. Later that evening, Dr. Grant walked across campus under a sky smeared with gray clouds. His steps were slow, heavy. A student passed him and smiled. He didn't smile back. He found himself at the faculty lounge, but couldn't bring himself to go in. Too many eyes. Too many whispers. He turned and walked instead toward the administration building. Dean Whitmore's office lights were still on. He paused, heart pounding. Grant knew the dean well. An old friend and frequent collaborator. Whitmore had once told him in jest, "We're not in the business of revolutions, Eliot. We're in the business of reputation." He could call him, let him know what was happening, warn him, not just about Booker, but about what the story could become. Grant stood outside the door for a long time, then walked past it, back to his office, alone. The clock struck 11:43 p.m. when he finally picked up the phone. The number he dialed wasn't the dean's. It rang twice, then a click. A voice answered. Male. Curt. Professional. "Hello? This is Dr. Eliot Grant," he said, voice taut. "I need to speak to someone regarding a sensitive matter involving a member of your department." A pause. Then the voice replied, "Go ahead." Grant hesitated, then continued. "There's a staff member.
Booker Lyles. He's been accessing academic materials unauthorized, entering rooms after hours, solving equations on the whiteboards. I have reason to believe he's been misrepresenting himself."
The voice on the line remained quiet for a moment. Then, "You want this documented?" "Yes," Grant said. "Off the record. For now. But if anything comes up, media inquiries, internal complaints, I want it clear that I flagged this." "Understood." The call ended. Grant sat back in his chair, staring at the receiver. He'd done it. Not support. Not suppression. Something worse. He'd chosen to preemptively destroy the man rather than risk his own name. It didn't feel victorious. It felt empty. And then just as he was about to pour another glass, an alert popped on his screen. An internal email, marked confidential, from Dean Whitmore. Subject: Ray Incident Report. Booker Lyles. Attached was a scanned page, Booker's personnel file. Annotated, highlighted, circled in red, Harvard, 2009, and academic misconduct. Private note. Grant's stomach twisted. He hadn't sent anything yet. Which meant the dean already knew. Already watching. Already pulling strings. Grant realized with icy clarity. His call hadn't been a warning. It had been confirmation. And in that moment, Dr. Eliot Grant understood that Booker Lyles wasn't just a risk to his legacy. He was a spark. One that could set fire to the entire house of glass that white academia had built on buried black brilliance. That night, Grant made a second call, not to offer help but to warn someone. The news began as a whisper. By Monday morning, that whisper had become a murmur. By Tuesday, a rumor. By Wednesday, it had become a low hum, vibrating through the entire mathematics department. A janitor. The janitor had been caught solving equations far beyond graduate-level comprehension. No one said Booker's name aloud in meetings, but everyone knew who they were talking about. The black man in navy work clothes. The one who emptied trash bins and mopped hallways with his head down. The one no one ever truly saw until now. Langston College wasn't a large school, but its faculty carried themselves like they were gatekeepers of something sacred. Prestige mattered, so did hierarchy. And in that hierarchy, Booker had always been at the bottom, until one night of truth upended everything. Now, professors who once ignored him couldn't stop talking about him, only not to his face. In the faculty lounge, the coffee machine hissed as two professors whispered near the window. "Did you hear about the incident in 4B? Dr. Renshaw murmured, stirring sugar into his cup. Dr. Keller raised a brow. "You mean the janitor thing?" Renshaw glanced over his shoulder before answering. "They say he solved one of Grant's open problems. Perfectly. Like he'd been teaching the course himself." "That's ridiculous," Keller scoffed. "I've read Grant's recent proofs. Half the department can't make sense of them." "You're telling me a custodian cracked it between mopping floors?" Renshaw shrugged. "That's what they're saying." Keller smirked, shaking his head. "Come on, Bob. This is how rumors start. Some bored student probably set him up. People love a miracle story, especially when it comes wrapped in a janitor's uniform." Renshaw lowered his voice. "Maybe, but Grant looked shaken when I saw him. Like he'd seen a ghost." The lounge fell silent when Dr. Grant himself walked in. His tie was crooked, his face drawn. He poured himself black coffee without meeting anyone's eyes. Conversations halted. Chairs creaked. The hum of gossip faded into thin air. Then, as soon as the door closed behind him, the whispers resumed. By noon, the story had spread to the English department, the cafeteria, and even the administration building. Everyone wanted to know, who was Booker Lyles, and how had he done it? Some found it inspiring. Most found it unsettling. He must have cheated somehow. Maybe he copied something off YouTube. There's no way a janitor's solving differential geometry. He's always been quiet. Those types are dangerous when they think too much. The conversations carried a tone Booker recognized instantly. The same tone used when people discussed him years ago at Harvard. Disbelief wrapped in civility. Praise twisted into suspicion. He'd seen this before, the moment when curiosity turned into fear. In the basement locker room, Booker sat on a wooden bench after his shift, still in uniform. His hands were dry from cleaning chemicals, his eyes heavy from lack of sleep. The air smelled of bleach and cheap soap. He stared at the small notebook he kept hidden in his work cart. His notebook of equations, sketches, thoughts. The same kind of book he used to carry as a student. He'd filled dozens over the years. Now those pages felt like evidence. He had overheard pieces of conversation all day. Snickers from graduate assistants, glances exchanged between administrators. When he passed through the hallway, voices quieted. When he entered the faculty lounge to take out trash, people suddenly remembered they had emails to check. It was as if he had crossed a boundary no one had given him permission to touch. Later that afternoon, while sweeping near the department office, Booker heard his name again. This time behind a closed door. Dr. Keller's voice. "If this gets out, we'll look ridiculous. Our own staff member making a mockery of the department? We can't have that." Dr. Renshaw replied. "Lower. You're overreacting. If he's really that gifted, maybe we should talk to him." "You don't get it," Keller snapped. "If we acknowledge it, we legitimize it. And then every journalist in the country is going to start asking how long we've ignored black talent in our own building. That's not a headline this college wants." Booker froze outside the door. His chest tightened. He had been invisible for years, ignored, overlooked. But now that they saw him, they wanted him hidden again. He stepped back quietly, careful not to make a sound. His broom handle trembled in his grip. That evening, Grant called an emergency meeting with the dean. Dean Whitmore's office was sleek and silent, lined with polished oak shelves and academic awards. He didn't look up from his desk as Grant entered. "You made the right call," Whitmore said flatly, scrolling through his computer. "You didn't mention this to anyone else, did you?" "No," Grant replied. "But the story's spreading. Faculty are talking." Whitmore's lips thinned. "Then we need to control the narrative, before it reaches outside the university." Grant hesitated. "Control it how?" Whitmore finally looked up. "We remind people of the facts. Mr. Lyles is an employee in facilities, not faculty. He has no academic standing here. Whatever he wrote on that board is a coincidence, a fluke. We emphasize that he was accessing restricted areas without authorization." Grant frowned. "You're going to punish him?" "I'm going to protect this institution." The dean replied coolly. "We can't let this turn into a spectacle. Not in today's climate." "Today's climate," Grant repeated, his voice hollow. "You mean, not when the world's already accusing universities of being racist?" Whitmore gave him a long, measured stare. "Don't be naive, Elliot. The issue isn't racism. It's order. If every staff member starts believing they can rewrite the system, we won't have one." The words hit Grant like cold air. He nodded silently, feeling his conscience retreat into the shadows where he'd kept it for years. By the next morning, the narrative had been rewritten. A memo circulated. "Unauthorized after-hours use of classroom spaces by custodial staff will be subject to disciplinary review." No names. No direct mention of Booker. But everyone knew. The timing was too deliberate. When Booker arrived for his shift that night, he found the door to room 4B locked. His keycard no longer worked. He tried another door. Locked. The message was clear: "Stay in your place." But Booker didn't walk away. Instead, he found an empty lecture room nearby and sat down in the dark, his reflection barely visible in the window glass. The loneliness didn't sting. It was familiar. What stung was the realization that history was repeating itself, perfectly, like a cruel equation. Harvard had buried him. Now Langston wanted to do the same. He whispered under his breath, almost laughing at the absurdity. Different campus, same math. Upstairs in the faculty lounge, Grant listened quietly as his colleagues continued their whispers. "I heard they might fire him. Good riddance. He should have known better. Can you imagine the PR nightmare if people think we overlooked a genius? They'll crucify us." Grant sipped his coffee in silence, eyes distant. For the first time, the familiar smell of the lounge, the stale coffee, the carpet cleaner made him sick. He excused himself and left. Downstairs, Booker was cleaning the last hallway when a student approached him, a shy freshman named Marcus, a young black man studying computer science. "Mr. Lyles?" the student asked. "Are you the one who solved Dr. Grant's equations?" Booker froze. "Who told you that?" "Everyone's talking about it," Marcus said quietly. "I just wanted to say, thank you. Seeing you here, doing what you did, it means something to me." Booker didn't answer right away. His throat tightened, and for a brief second, the walls around him, walls built from shame, silence, and fear, cracked open just enough for a sliver of light. He nodded. "Keep studying, Marcus. Don't stop. No matter what they tell you." Marcus smiled faintly and walked away. Booker watched him go, his reflection flickering in the glass door. He felt both proud and terrified. Proud that someone had seen him. Terrified that it might cost him everything. Later that night, the dean's assistant entered Whitmore's office. "Sir," she said, holding a file. "You asked for this." Whitmore took it without looking. The folder was slim. Booker's personnel record, employment dates, performance notes, emergency contact. Everything neat, impersonal. But on the top right corner, he took a red pen and drew a small mark. A diagonal slash. It wasn't much, just enough to flag the file in the system for administrative review. As he closed the folder, he muttered to himself, "Can't have janitors thinking they're mathematicians." The sound of the folder snapping shut echoed like a verdict. Someone from the dean's office had requested Booker's personnel file, and quietly flagged it. The hallway outside room 214 was quiet, the echo of Booker Lyles's mop wheels subsiding like distant rain. He emerged at the end of his shift, eyes heavy, mind still tracing the last chalked symbol on the board, the symbol that had set everything in motion. He paused for a moment in the flickering fluorescent light, listening to the hum of the building's cooling system, the faint footstep of the overnight security guard. A chill settled over him, though the air was warm, because the world he had slipped into while solving that equation, the old math brilliance awakened in him, was now slipping away again. Inside the room, the whiteboard stood, half-erased lines of symbols, half-cleared erasures, a ghost of his thought haunting the clean surface, the ghost of something no one expected a janitor to conjure. He had stepped back to spray and wipe those chalk lines away, submerged his mind in the mechanical rhythm of cleaning. Spray, wipe, rinse, repeat. But something told him they weren't gone, because cameras had watched, because the institution had seen. 3 days later, an email arrived in Booker's inbox. "Review of CCTV footage, required. Please present yourself in the HR conference room, October 17, 7:30 a.m. No reason, no explanation, just a sterile summons. The font was corporate gray, the tone cold. Booker stared at the screen, heart racing. For a moment, he did not reply. He recalled the janitorial closet, the supplies, the hallway echoes, and that night by the board. He swallowed. He typed back, "I'll attend." He arrived 10 minutes early. The conference room door bore a label, HR and Compliance. He entered expecting a typical HR meeting, perhaps a routine check-in, perhaps nothing at all. Instead, the man waiting behind the table was not from Human Resources. He was from Campus Security, chevrons on his sleeve, clipboard in hand, badge low. The suddenness of the twist stole the breath from Booker's lungs. He'd assumed he was in trouble over tampering with academic spaces, but he thought it would come from administration, a dean, or at worst HR. Not this. "Mr. Lyles," the officer said, voice flat, businesslike. "Thank you for arriving on time. Please have a seat." Booker slid into the chair. The windows were dark, the lights harsh, the only decoration a mounted camera in the corner of the ceiling, its lens cold. He realized the irony. The very surveillance meant to protect had become the weapon. The officer opened the clipboard. "We have footage of you in room 214, on October 14, at approximately 2:47 a.m. You were standing at the whiteboard, writing for approximately 20 minutes. Booker's heart skipped. The camera had recorded him. He wanted to speak. Instead, he nodded. "Yes," he said quietly. "I was there." "Why were you there?" the officer asked. The tone was neutral, but Booker sensed the accusation hovering in the air. Someone shouldn't have been there. He took a breath, his throat dry. "I was cleaning," he said, and then I paused. "I noticed something on the board, some equations I didn't recognize. I started working through them." He exhaled. "I didn't mean, I just couldn't help myself." The officer's pen wrote in silence. "The university administration, interprets your actions as unauthorized interference with academic property. This is considered tampering with educational infrastructure. Booker's stomach turned. Tampering? He echoed. Voice low. Sir, I wasn't trying to interfere. I was solving. Because I recognized the symbols. Because I recognized the context. He looked the officer in the eye. I'm not just a janitor. The officer paused. His expression unreadable. The fact remains. You accessed a restricted academic space, at unscheduled hours. You left marks. You disturbed the environment. The institution holds you accountable. Your job is under review. Booker felt his chest tighten. He glanced down at his own clothes. The Navy janitor uniform, badge number faint on the pocket. He remembered the prodigy past he had hidden. But not now. Not in this moment. This moment his identity was reduced to job risk. Outside the door, he could hear voices in the hallway, muffled. The hum of the building, the offices closing for the night. He sat there, forced into the role of accused, of suspect. His mind raced. The folds of his life, the derailments, the closings of doors, and now this, because he had dared to think. The officer continued, you may also be aware that our CCTV system not only monitors public areas, but logs access time in classrooms after hours, and atypical behavior. The footage shows you alone in the room, working quietly, then eventually leaving at 3:12 a.m. Booker swallowed. Yes, he said. I left then. He didn't add what else he was doing then. His mind still turning the equations, rediscovering the theorems. He didn't add that he felt alive for those 20 minutes. Because he was afraid. Because you're not listed as faculty or a student. Your presence is flagged. The officer looked up. The university is demanding immediate action. Termination is on the table. We have to decide whether to recommend suspension pending investigation. Do you have anything to say in your defense? Booker looked away for a moment, the light catching the sweat on his brow. He rubbed his fingers together. Yes, he said finally. I may not have been listed as faculty or student, but I was there because I understand the mathematics. I wasn't vandalizing, I was solving. And if that's disallowed, then I don't know what kind of institution this is. The officer leaned back. We have forwarded the footage and report to the dean's office. You can contact a representative, but while the review is ongoing, you are not suspended yet. Booker exhaled, relief mixed with dread. Not suspended yet. The word hovered like a storm cloud. He left the room and walked the hallway alone, mop bucket in hand, late-night shadows stretching from the ceiling lights. Each step felt heavier. He passed the wall of the math department, the offices of the faculty, the graduate student suites, spaces he had once dreamed of occupying, back when his mind had soared. Now he was invisible again. Until recently he'd been cleaning chalk dust from those corridors. Now he was cleaning from within, battling ghosts of whiteboards and surveillance cameras. The next day whispers rippled through the department. A faculty member texted another. Have you seen the footage of the janitor in room 214? Another wrote, if he's that smart, why wasn't he in a PhD program? Booker heard some of it while polishing the hallway glass. His earbuds in, but the voices reached him anyway. He heard the laugh behind him. The room fall silent when he entered. He felt the looks. He felt the shrinkage of space around him. At lunch he sat in the cafeteria with his usual tray. Half-warmed leftovers from the vending machine. The room hummed with faculty conversation. Quantum topics. Integrals. Departmental funding. He overheard a professor ask, did someone hack the board last week? The whiteboard had strange equations. A lecturer answered. Apparently the janitor was seen solving them. Can you imagine? Booker kept his head down, spoon in hand, taste dulled. He wondered. Imagine what, exactly? Later that afternoon, a new email arrived. Your access badge has been temporarily deactivated. Pending review. Another blow. He couldn't access the supply rooms, the classroom keys, the late-night shifts. He asked the supervisor what was happening. The supervisor said, they're reviewing some footage. Something about room 214. The supervisor's voice was sympathetic but weak. I'm sorry, Booker. That word so soft felt empty. They didn't know. They didn't care. Booker trudged home that night, his mind not on rest. He carried instead the heavy weight of visibility. He had been seen, but not recognized. And being seen wasn't freedom, it was vulnerability. That weekend, he returned to the classroom. He had to wipe the board, clear the evidence of his presence. He pushed the cart of cleaning supplies inside, though his badge no longer unlocked the door automatically. He used the manual override. He came in at 10 p.m., alone. He switched on the light. The board's ghost remained, faint lines of chalk, erased but visible in the glare of the overhead lamp. He stood before it, bottle of cleaner in hand. He hesitated. His heart beat faster, because this board represented everything. The board was his confession, his secret, his hope. He sprayed the cleaner and started wiping, faster, stronger. He scrubbed the board until sweat beaded on his forehead, and the erasers glowed under the lights. Finally, he stepped back. The board was blank, clean, as if nothing had happened. But as he turned to leave, he noticed the camera on the ceiling, its lens pointed directly at him. A plain black dome that had witnessed his shift, his clean, and now his attempt to vanish evidence. He froze. He realized they didn't need his signature. They had it all. Surveillance hadn't protected him. It watched him, and now it would judge him. The next weekday morning, despite his badge still deactivated, the supervisor told him, "We need to reassign you to day shifts for now, until this is resolved." Booker nodded, silent. He took the mop and bucket, slunk into daylight corridors, sun streaming through windows but offering no warmth. He cleaned while professors passed by, their eyes avoiding him. He cleaned while graduate students chatted about upcoming conferences. The world continued. He purified the floors, pushed the mop as though wiping away his own dream. But inside him, a fire burned. He thought of the whiteboard, of the equations he had solved, of the brilliance they refused to see. He thought of the faculty lounge, of the looks, of the whispers. He thought of the camera, and he formulated a plan. Booker's phone buzzed that evening. A message from the campus newspaper reporter he'd met once. A brief conversation about cleaning schedules. "Can we talk?" the message read. His heart raced again. He knew this reporter didn't care about janitors. She cared about stories. Maybe she cared about his. Maybe he could turn visibility into voice. He agreed to meet her in a cafe near campus at 7 p.m. He arrived early, nerves buzzing. She greeted him with coffee and recorder. The interview began benignly. "Tell me about your job here." Booker paused, took a sip. "I've been cleaning these halls for 7 years," he said. "I've seen more chalk dust than lectures." The interviewer smiled politely. "But last week you were seen solving equations. Can you tell me how that happened?" Booker's throat tightened. For a moment he considered denying it. For a moment he remembered all the times no one listened. He said, "Sometimes the board speaks to me. The numbers ask to be solved." The interviewer blinked, intrigued. Then there was the twist. He pulled his phone and showed her the original photograph from his undergrad thesis. A formal portrait of a 22-year-old Booker, cap and gown, holding a certificate, eyes hopeful. The reporter gasped. "You had a scholarship to Cambridge?" she asked. He nodded. "I did." He told her how a false accusation of plagiarism ended it. How he slipped into custodial work because no one investigated his side. The reporter's pen paused. She looked up. "This changes everything," she whispered. Booker left the cafe that night with renewed purpose, but also with dread. Because he had opened a door. He had revealed his past, and he didn't know who was listening. Just as he reached his car, his phone buzzed again. A calendar invite. Title: Hearing, Disciplinary Review. October 24, 8 a.m. He clicked it. The organizer, Office of Student Affairs. Booker's heart lurched. Then an email arrived. "Please bring any documentation you wish to share." The sender, the dean's assistant. Booker knew he was standing on the edge of a precipice. The surveillance footage had been weaponized. The board became evidence. The story twisted. He wasn't cleaning floors anymore, he was cleaning accusations. He wasn't solving equations anymore. He was solving injustice. But the system still had the upper hand. Cameras, policies, power, and the next move would not be his alone. As he turned away from his car, he heard footsteps behind him. He glanced back. Nobody visible. The street lamp flickered. He started walking briskly. The mop bucket in his trunk rattled, a faint reminder of what was still his job. The phone buzzed again. "Do not attend the hearing unaccompanied." It was unsigned. He froze. The summons to the hearing loomed. Booker realized he wasn't just facing HR, and the person he would meet across the table explicitly wasn't from human resources at all. The email summoned him to a hearing, but Booker Lyles wasn't alone anymore. Someone else had been watching, not through a camera but through time. Miles away, in a quiet suburb lined with maple trees turned copper by autumn, Dr. Evelyn Trask sipped her morning tea and read the Midwest Academic Digest on her tablet. The headline froze her hand mid-air. University janitor under review for academic tampering. Footage raises questions. Her pulse slowed. The photo beneath the headline, grainy black and white still of a man before a whiteboard, hit her like a ghostly echo. The curve of his handwriting, the long pause before each symbol, the left-handed tilt. "Lord," she whispered. "That's him. Booker Lyles." The name she hadn't spoken aloud in over a decade. She set the tablet down. Her heart beat faster. She remembered him as the freshman who'd challenged her in differential equations. Respectful, sharp, curious. The only student who'd ever asked, "Why does math feel like music if everyone says it's mechanical?" She remembered his eyes when the administration expelled him. The day she'd tried to intervene, and they told her to stay out of it if she wanted tenure. She never forgot that humiliation. And she never forgot the boy they erased. Evelyn rose slowly from her kitchen chair, her knees aching with the stiffness of age and memory. She moved toward the hallway, where degrees framed in oak hung beside a single photo, the 2008 math department portrait. 15 white men, 1 white woman, and her at the edge, smiling faintly, hair pressed, posture dignified, expression unreadable. She'd walked away from that world 7 years ago, retired early, they'd said. In truth, she was pushed out, denied funding, isolated from committees, stripped of her graduate advisees one by one. The system didn't fire her, it froze her until she left. Now it was calling her back, in the shape of an injustice she couldn't ignore. That afternoon she drove toward the university. The campus hadn't changed much. New glass buildings beside old limestone ones. Students in hoodies rushing across the quad. Laughter and caffeine in the air. Yet to her it all felt staged, like a photograph pretending to be alive. She parked near the faculty lot, though her permit had long expired, and walked toward the mathematics hall, her heels clicking softly on the pavement. Inside, the receptionist looked up, blinking. "Can I help you?" Ellen smiled. "Yes, dear. Tell Dean Morrison that Dr. Evelyn Trask would like a word." The young woman hesitated. Dr. Trask, you haven't been employed here?" Evelyn finished for her. "No, but you'll find my name still on the emeritus list. Second floor, west corridor. Go ahead and check." The receptionist did, and froze. The record was there. Old but still archived. She lifted the phone. "Dean Morrison, there's someone here you'll want to see." Minutes later, Evelyn entered the dean's office. Morrison stood behind his desk, white hair, tailored suit, polished smile, the kind of man who never had to raise his voice to remind people of power. "Dr. Trask," he said smoothly. "It's been a long time." "Not long enough," she replied. He gestured toward a chair. "To what do we owe this surprise?" She sat, placing her purse on her lap, eyes steady. "I read about a janitor named Booker Lyles. The one your cameras caught doing math." Morrison chuckled softly. "Ah, yes, unfortunate situation. Overstepping boundaries, I'm afraid. The optics are optics," she cut in. "That's what you called it when you denied my tenure-track promotion for optical concerns. You said I was too outspoken. Now it's optics again." Morrison's smile flickered. "Evelyn, let's not relitigate the past." "Oh, I think we should," she said, leaning forward. "Because the past has a way of writing itself on the present. And if that man Booker is who I think he is, you're about to relive a very public mistake." He raised an eyebrow. "And what exactly is your connection to this custodian?" "He was my student," she said simply, "and one of the brightest I ever taught." Morrison's tone cooled. "Then perhaps you understand the problem better than most. He's not faculty, he's not enrolled. He has no credentials to be solving doctoral-level equations on a university board at 3 in the morning." Evelyn tilted her head. "And if those equations are correct? If he's rediscovered something your faculty can't explain?" Morrison frowned. "We're handling it internally. The administration will make the appropriate decision." "I'm sure you will," she said, standing. "You always do." Before she turned to leave, she glanced around his office. The same paintings, the same mahogany shelves, the same silence when truth entered the room. Outside, the hallway air felt thinner, but Evelyn smiled to herself, because she had seen it before. The institutional fear of a black mind that didn't ask for permission. That evening, she found Booker's number through an old colleague, still friendly to her cause. "Dr. Hansen, The only one who'd ever apologized after she left. He's living on the south side, Hanson whispered over the phone. Still cleaning buildings. He doesn't talk much. But he's special, Evelyn. I knew you'd care. I do, she said softly. She dialed. 1 ring. 2. Then a voice. Cautious and deep. Booker Lyles speaking. Booker, she said. You don't remember me. Or maybe you do. This is Dr. Trask. Silence. Then a breath. Dr. Trask? From advanced calculus? Yes, she said. I saw the news. I'm sorry it took me this long.
Booker laughed quietly. You saw it, huh? They're making me out like I vandalized the place.
I know how that feels, she murmured. Listen, I want to meet off campus. Somewhere quiet. He hesitated. Why? Because they're not done with you yet, she said. And because I think I have something that belongs to you. They met the next day in a small diner on the edge of town. One of those places where the coffee tastes like burnt hope, and the walls are lined with faded Route 66 posters. Evelyn spotted him immediately. The same thoughtful slouch, the same analytical eyes that saw through noise. But time had chiseled weariness into his face. Dr. Trask, he said, sliding into the booth. It's been a minute. Too many, she replied. He smiled faintly. You shouldn't be here. You know, they don't like people talking to me right now. That's exactly why I'm here. He looked down, fiddling with his cup. They're saying I trespassed, tampered with academic property, like I'm some kind of criminal for touching a marker. Ellen leaned in. You wrote something, didn't you? Something they didn't understand. Booker hesitated, then nodded. A problem Professor Grant left half done. I couldn't help myself. It was wrong, incomplete. I fixed it. Evelyn's lips curved into a quiet smile. Of course you did. Booker exhaled. Now I might lose my job. All because I solved a damn equation. She reached across the table, her voice firm but tender. They did the same to me. Different excuse. Same fear. You scare them, Booker. Not because of what you did, but because of what it proves. He frowned. And what's that? That brilliance doesn't come with credentials. It comes with truth. And truth in their world is only valid when it comes from the right hands. He looked away, his jaw tight. So what now? They'll bury me. Maybe, she said. But I still know where they keep the shovel. He chuckled for the first time that day. When they parted, Evelyn drove home through dusk, headlights cutting through the falling leaves. She thought about the boy who'd once asked her if math had a soul. She thought about how they'd punished him for thinking beyond boundaries. And she thought about the dusty attic she hadn't entered in years. That night she climbed the creaky wooden steps, flashlight in hand. The air was thick with dust, and the scent of cardboard decay. Boxes lined the walls. Lecture notes, 1999, 2007. Old student projects, personal files. She coughed, pulling a tarp off an old chest. Inside, her fingers brushed against faded papers, folders labeled in her looping handwriting. She opened one pages of student evaluations, another of conference programs. Then beneath it, a sealed manila envelope with a torn corner and the faint blue ink of a name she hadn't seen since she left. Booker T. Lyles, Mathematical Symmetry and Cognitive Mapping in Nonlinear Spaces. Her breath caught. His thesis. The one that disappeared from departmental archives when he was accused of plagiarism. She'd searched for it years ago, but someone had wiped it clean from the record. Her hands trembled as she pulled out the first page. The equations, elegant and precise, leapt off the yellowed paper like living things. The date on the cover to Hashim's signature at the bottom. Her advisor note on the side. Promising. Publish immediately. She sank to her knees on the attic floor, emotion flooding her. They hadn't just erased him from the university. They'd stolen his work and maybe built careers on it. She reached deeper into the box. Beneath the thesis lay a folder marked Trask Correspondence. Inside she found printed emails, forwarded exchanges between professors, all dated the same week. Booker was expelled. We need to ensure this student doesn't return next semester. If Trask defends him, we'll reconsider her tenure package. Evelyn shut her eyes. Her past and his collided like two equations meeting at infinity. She finally saw the full shape of what they'd done. Her flashlight beam dimmed as the batteries faded, the attic folding back into shadow. She sat there, surrounded by papers, by evidence, Then she stood, clutching the thesis to her chest, resolve settling over her like armor. They buried you once, Booker, she whispered into the dark. But not this time. Evelyn brushed off the dust and carried the box toward the stairs. When she opened it under the lamp, she froze. Because inside, beneath Booker's thesis, was something she didn't remember ever owning. A faculty research draft with Professor Elliot Grant's name on it, and Booker's equations printed word for word. Her hand trembled. "Dear God," she whispered. They stole it from him. And as the lamp flickered, the attic filled with the sound of rustling paper, the past coming alive again. The morning sky above the university crackled with a cold October sun, the kind that lit everything sharply but gave off no warmth. Banners for the Tri-State Advanced Mathematics Symposium rippled in the breeze across campus lawns. Professors smiled politely as they ushered in students from elite schools, while camera crews from local news stations milled outside the math auditorium. It was invitation only. Faculty recommendations required. Suits preferred. No janitors allowed. But someone forgot to mention that to Booker Lyles. Inside room 312, the preliminary qualifying round had begun. Students in pressed collars hunched over white tables, heads bowed, scribbling furiously through two timed problems projected on a screen. The air hummed with tension, pride and quiet competition, the kind that always assumes the playing field is naturally uneven, and always in one direction. In the back row, one competitor didn't belong, at least not on paper. Booker sat calmly, hoodie zipped halfway, face neutral, no school badge, no faculty escort, just a pen gripped tightly in his left hand, and a quiet fire in his eyes. Next to him sat Evelyn Trask, silent, dignified. Her return to campus had stirred whispers, some thrilled, some nervous. But today she wasn't here to prove anything to them. She was here to witness a resurrection. "How are you feeling?" she asked, voice low. Booker exhaled. "Like I brought a mop into a sword fight." Evelyn smirked. "Good. They won't see you coming."
They hadn't.
A month earlier, Evelyn had pulled strings with the symposium director, a former mentee who still respected her legacy. The rules were clear. Anyone could compete in the preliminary qualifiers anonymously, as long as they passed the blind mathematical entrance exam. No photos, no bios, just numbers. Evelyn submitted Booker's qualifying equations under the alias B.L. Mather. He scored highest in the state, and that's how a janitor got a seat in a room designed to exclude him. The buzzer sounded. "Time's up, pencils down," the moderator announced. Booker leaned back, calm. His paper sat untouched for the last 6 minutes. He'd finished early, not because it was easy, but because the problems were familiar, almost nostalgic. His mind moved through them like a pianist playing an old favorite, with his eyes closed. Around him, students muttered. "Who's that guy? He's not from Caltech, I checked the list. Looks like one of the maintenance dudes. Maybe he's someone's dad?" Booker ignored them. He'd learned long ago how to let silence be his armor. 2 hours later, the results were posted on the auditorium screen. 10 names moved forward to the main stage. And the top name read, B.L. Mather. A hush swept the room. One student, lanky, blonde, wearing a Princeton lanyard, hissed, "That's impossible." Another muttered, "I only missed 4. He must have cheated." And yet no one knew who B.L. Mather was. Not yet. On the main stage, rows of spectators filled the auditorium. Professors, alumni, sponsors, and students from across the region. Each finalist was called up one by one to a standing ovation, until the final name. "B.L. Mather, please come to the stage." There was a beat of confusion. A pause. Then Booker stood. The applause faltered. Whispers began. The applause died. He walked slowly to the podium. The lights washed over his uniform. He hadn't changed. The same hoodie, the same work boots. The moderator, clearly caught off guard, adjusted the mic awkwardly. "Sir, are you B.L. Mather?" Booker nodded once. "Yes." A few scattered gasps rippled from the crowd. Someone muttered too loudly, "He's the janitor." The moderator cleared his throat. "Mr. Mather, Lyles, your presence here is unconventional." Evelyn stood in the back, arms folded, gaze locked on the stage like a general watching her soldiers step into battle. "Should we verify your submission with a faculty sponsor?" the moderator asked. Booker's voice was even, deliberate. "You already verified my math." The room went dead quiet. Someone in the front row chuckled, one of the older judges. "Let him solve. If his numbers are as sharp as his wit, we're in for a show." The moderator relented. "Proceed." The final round began. Live solving. Each finalist faced a set of advanced problems under timed conditions, while the audience watched via projector. When it was Booker's turn, the room held its breath. He stepped to the board. The timer began. 18 minutes later, he stepped back, chalk smudged on his hands. Equation complete, solution circled. He didn't even look at the crowd. He looked at the math, like it was a window out of the room. The judges exchanged glances. One whispered something to the moderator. Another squinted at the board, then looked at her phone to verify the steps. Slowly, murmurs turned into nods. Correct, one judge said. Elegant and unorthodox. Another added, he approached it using abstract vector symmetries. That's not even in the official curriculum. But the room wasn't celebrating. It was splintering. Because what they'd just seen wasn't just talent. It was proof. Proof that someone they'd overlooked, someone they'd dismissed, had just outperformed their best. One student stood abruptly. The blonde one from earlier. His voice cut through the air. There's no way he did that without help. Heads turned. The student pointed directly at Evelyn in the back of the room. She's feeding him problems. Or answers. She's rigging this. Evelyn didn't flinch. She stepped forward, heels echoing on the tile. I haven't seen this man solve anything since the prelims, she said clearly. And you know what terrifies you more than the idea of cheating? She turned slowly to the crowd. That he's not. That he really is this brilliant. And that your rules didn't catch him first. The blonde student's fists clenched. This is a joke. No, she said softly. This is justice. He stormed off the stage, muttering under his breath. He doesn't belong here. But Evelyn turned to the crowd, eyes shining. He belonged here before you ever did. You just couldn't see it through your math-colored glasses. The crowd didn't applaud. Not yet. But they didn't stop her either. Backstage, Booker sat on a bench, rubbing chalk dust off his hands. Evelyn joined him. You shook the hornet's nest, she said. They were already buzzing, he replied. I just kicked the hive. A student walked by and shot him a look. Not fear, not respect, something else. Contempt laced with disbelief. They'll say I cheated. They said that about me too. Evelyn replied. They said I didn't write my own dissertation. That I couldn't have passed my Princeton exams without help. Help from who? She smirked. Jesus. Apparently. They both laughed. A small, cracked laugh. The kind you only earn after swallowing shame for decades. That night, the symposium released the results online. Booker placed second, just 1 point behind a Yale prodigy. Some said the scoring was biased. Others said it was generous. But the comment section said it all. Wait, isn't this guy the janitor? How does a janitor beat kids from MIT? Reverse racism at work.
This is inspiring.
This is embarrassing for academia. I don't believe this story. He was probably coached. They just gave it to him so the school doesn't look racist. Can we talk about the math instead of the man? The man is the math. The next morning, Booker returned to work. His badge still didn't work, but he wasn't angry anymore, because the board wasn't blank anymore, and neither was the world. He pushed his mop bucket down the same hallway as always. But this time, students stepped aside. Some stared. Some avoided eye contact. A few nodded. And one student, a young black girl with tight curls and oversized glasses, stopped him. Mr. Lyles? He turned. Yeah? She smiled nervously. I saw you at the symposium. I wanted to say thank you. For showing us we could. Booker looked at her. Really looked. What's your name? Janelle, she said. I want to major in applied mathematics. But they keep telling me to pick something easier. Booker reached into his pocket and pulled out a scrap of paper. He wrote an equation, one she wouldn't understand yet. Take this to your advisor, he said. Tell them you know exactly what you're capable of. She stared at it, like it was treasure. Thank you, he smiled. They can question my presence, my credentials, my uniform, but they can't question the math. Math doesn't lie. That afternoon, while Booker was wiping down a classroom chalkboard, he found something slipped under the door, an envelope with no return address. Inside, a single page, a photocopy of a published paper from. The title read, Nonlinear Symmetry Algorithms in Spatial Reasoning, authored by E. Grant. And in the footnotes, equations that were unmistakably his. Stolen. Republished. Disguised. He stared at the page as his hands trembled. They didn't just erase me, he whispered. They built careers on what they stole. And that's when the idea hit him. He wouldn't just prove them wrong. He'd take it all back, publicly. The envelope sat on Booker's small apartment table, like it carried a ghost. He didn't touch it for hours after opening it. Just stared at the page inside. The same stolen equations. The same academic jargon rearranged, like borrowed feathers on someone else's wings. Nonlinear symmetry algorithms in spatial reasoning. E. Grant. First and only author. His hands trembled, but not from shock. From clarity. This wasn't just neglect. This was theft. This is what the expulsion, the accusations, the silence had all led to. Erasure that someone had filled with their own name. He called Evelyn. She arrived 40 minutes later, breathless, hair still wrapped in a silk scarf. He laid the paper down in front of her. She read silently. Then she closed her eyes. This was yours. Booker nodded. They didn't bury it. They used it. Evelyn's jaw clenched. And they didn't expect you to come back for it. That's the only reason it stayed in circulation. They both sat in the thick quiet that followed. For years, Booker had told himself maybe the world had moved on. Maybe the silence around his name was coincidence. But now, the silence had a name. And it was Professor Elliot Grant. Evelyn stood. We're not gonna let them get away with this. But they were already trying to get away with something else. Because by the next morning, social media lit up like a fire alarm. A Reddit thread titled "Proof the Janitor Cheated" hit the campus forum. Dozens of anonymous users chimed in. Usernames like StemKing42, DeanList for Life, and Trust the Data. The thread included screenshots, supposed emails between Evelyn and the symposium organizers, messages that hinted at leaking questions in advance. Then came the notes. A PDF posted under the guise of an anonymous whistleblower, labeled Booker Lyles Math Binder. Inside, chicken scratch handwriting, obvious misspellings, inconsistent logic, and incorrect formulas. The implication: Booker had submitted someone else's work, probably Evelyn's, and had never been capable of solving those problems on his own. It wasn't just misinformation. It was weaponized disbelief. Twitter X threads ballooned. Instagram stories with yellow caution tape gifs flooded the university's student accounts. Is he even really who he says he is? Evelyn Trask was discredited years ago. Why should we trust her now? They're both bitter, washed-up failures looking for attention. We have screenshots. Case closed. The backlash hit hard. Booker scrolled silently through his phone that night in his dark apartment. No lamps, no TV, just glow on face, pain in chest. He knew none of the messages were real. But truth didn't matter here. Perception had been hijacked. The room seemed to shrink around him. He felt 14 again, back in a high school gifted program, where a teacher said, "You're a good guesser, huh?" After he beat the state champion. He felt 22 again, being escorted out of the university library, while other students whispered. Even now, with all his knowledge, all his patience, all his poise, they found a way to twist it, rewrite him as a liar, repaint him in the colors they found most comfortable, suspicious, dangerous, unworthy. At the university, things got worse. Booker arrived on campus to find his locker emptied. No note, no explanation. A new temp janitor had been brought in. When Booker asked his supervisor why, the man only shook his head. "This came from upstairs, man. I'm sorry." "Am I fired?" "No. But your badge is revoked, and there's a pending investigation. HR says you'll be contacted. Until then, you're on administrative leave. Without pay?" A long pause. Without pay. Booker walked off campus that day without saying a word. Evelyn, meanwhile, stormed into the dean's office, again, this time with documents, back up in fury. Morrison met her with the same velvet smile. "Dr. Trask," again. She threw the fake screenshots on his desk. "These are fabricated." He picked them up, pretending to study them. "We'll have our IT department verify the sources. And in the meantime, you punish an innocent man?" Morrison folded his hands. "In the meantime, we manage risk. The integrity of our academic programs comes first." Then where was that integrity when Grant plagiarized Booker's thesis? Morrison didn't answer. Eleanor narrowed her eyes. "I know about the paper. His equations. Grant's name." He looked down, adjusted his tie. "That was a long time ago. And you buried it. We protected the university." "No," Evelyn said, rising. "You protected the lie." That night, the hate reached Booker's apartment. A crumpled flyer taped to his door. "Mop floors. Don't fake degrees. Math is for thinkers, not frauds. You're not a genius. You're a janitor. He peeled it off with shaking hands. The old rage bubbled up again, but he didn't scream. He sat on the steps outside his building, head in hand. When Evelyn arrived with takeout, she found him there. You were right, he muttered. They don't care what's true. She sat beside him. Not yet, but someone will. He looked at her. What if it doesn't matter? What if they already won? Ellen opened the bag of food, handed him a fork. You're still here, aren't you? He nodded. Barely. Then they haven't won yet. The next day a surprise came from inside the system. A grad student named Marina Chow, assistant to one of the math judges, emailed Evelyn anonymously. The subject line, I think you're being framed. Inside metadata logs from the screenshots posted online. Dr. Trask, I don't know you, the email began, but I believe in facts. The screenshots circulating about you and Mr. Lyles are digitally fabricated. I compared timestamps and font layering. They were doctored using an auto template on Canva and PDF splice. Whoever posted them edited metadata out of sync. I teach coding in undergrad labs. I noticed because I've helped students build their own fake schedules using similar tools. Attached were side-by-side comparisons of real university emails versus the fakes. Dates misaligned. Footer fonts mismatched. Marina ended with, I haven't told anyone. I'm scared, but this isn't okay. Ellen stared at the screen, stunned. Then she forwarded the message to Booker with the subject line, we have something real now. Still, the smear campaign wasn't slowing down. That night, a campus newsletter ran a headline, Truth or Sympathy? Did the janitor really earn his spot? With a poll, do you think Mr. Lyles should be disqualified? 68% voted yes, but something was shifting. Quietly, in the corners of the internet, an anonymous user, handle A Truth in Tenure, began posting subtle fact-based counters. What if we told you Grant's 2011 paper matched Lyles's 2010 thesis word for word? What if the faculty knew and kept quiet? Want the truth? Check Professor Grant's deleted files. The post went viral. It was shared across Reddit, Twitter X, Discord, and private academic forums. It wasn't just gossip now. It was a breadcrumb trail, the kind that could lead to exposure or destruction. Booker read the post 3 times before he moved. His pulse raced. He picked up his old laptop, the one he hadn't opened in years, and began typing. Search terms. Archives. Faculty FTPs. Old network credentials. Evelyn had once taught him how to access the backup portal. Maybe it still worked. Then, a ping. An anonymous tip in his inbox. Try looking in the April 2011 grant proposal backups. Folder. Fasci disk seer. ERNT. Booker ALT. He clicked. Password required. He tried his name, his student ID, the last 4 digits of his old phone number. Then he paused. He typed, Euler Fibonacci 2010, a phrase only a true math nerd would pick. Access granted. Inside, dozens of documents. Most were meaningless, but one file stopped him cold. Booker original thesis edited version.com. He opened it. Tracked changes activated. The author name, Elliot Grant. The file revealed every revision, the replaced name, the swapped order of citations, the deletion of Evelyn's advisor note. Booker's breath caught. They hadn't just stolen his work. They'd edited it on a university machine and saved the damn receipts. He scrolled to the bottom of the file and found something he hadn't expected. A hidden comment, a reviewer note in the margin from a peer editor. I'm not sure Grant should claim sole authorship. These methods aren't his. The initials beside the comment, J.D. Booker froze. That wasn't a student. That was Dean Morrison. The cover-up had gone deeper than plagiarism. The dean had known. And now, Booker had proof. Booker stared at the glowing laptop screen, heart hammering like a slow, broken metronome. The tracked edits glowed in red and blue lines through his words, new text inserted in Grant's crisp phrasing. Every stroke a scar across his work. At the bottom of the document, the comment still flickered like a living accusation. I'm not sure Grant should claim sole authorship. These methods aren't his. J.D. Dean Morrison. Booker leaned back, eyes burning. The revelation wasn't clean. It was muddy, ugly, heavy. Proof wasn't freedom. Proof was a floodgate. He scrolled through the file again, slower this time. Each alteration a blade. His title page gone. His dedication to his mother deleted. His original name, Booker T. Lyles, replaced with Elliot Grant. He whispered to the empty room. Voice cracked. They took everything. Every equation, every paragraph, every sleepless night from his 20s. Gone from him, reborn under another man's name. The file metadata showed it all. Author E. Grant. Last modified by Dean Morrison. It wasn't sabotage. It was theft. When Evelyn arrived, the next morning, Booker was still sitting at his desk. Eyes hollow, laptop open. He didn't look up. They knew. Ellen approached slowly, her heels echoing on the old wooden floor. Booker. They all knew. Morrison, Grant, maybe others. That file was saved on a university drive. They didn't even try to hide it. They just rewrote me. He turned the laptop toward her. She read in silence, her mouth tightening, the muscles in her jaw flickering as she reached the comment. When she spoke, her voice trembled between rage and awe. This is a confession. Booker's laugh came out sharp. A confession that'll never see daylight. Elowen's eyes flashed. Oh, it'll see daylight. I promise you that. They spent hours printing everything, line by line, page by page, until the room filled with piles of paper. His equations, her notes, Grant's revisions. The old printer wheezed under the weight of vindication. By noon, Evelyn had filled an entire binder. Evidence thicker than a Bible. Every crime leaves fingerprints, she murmured. These are theirs. Booker sat on the couch, staring at the pages. He looked both vindicated and shattered. Why now, he said quietly. Why did they even bother stealing it back then? There are 1,000 papers like mine. Ellen stopped stacking. Because you were better. He frowned. She pointed at the equations. That symmetry model you built. The one they pretended was theirs. It's genius. It solved a century-old problem about recursive geometry. It was groundbreaking. They didn't just take your name, they took your future. Booker rubbed his eyes. They took more than that. She looked at him softly. Your hope. He nodded once. Meanwhile on campus, the storm kept brewing. Professor Elliot Grant had seen the anonymous online post. Check Professor Grant's deleted files. At first he dismissed it as a prank, but when IT emailed him asking to verify old backups, his pulse spiked. He went to the dean's office immediately. Morrison, he hissed, closing the door behind him. Someone's digging into the archives. Morrison barely looked up from his laptop. We've noticed. Then stop it, Grant snapped. If they find that file, they won't. Grant leaned forward, voice tight. You've said that before, and now someone's already hinting online. How long before that janitor connects the dots? Morrison sighed. Grant, calm down. You calm down when your name's on stolen research. Morrison's gaze turned cold. Your name's on a tenured position. A house in faculty housing. A pension. You think anyone's going to care about some ghost student from a decade ago? Grant's throat tightened. He's not just a ghost anymore. He's everywhere. Morrison's fingers drummed on the desk. Then we make him vanish again. Grant blinked. What do you mean? Discredit him completely. Before he gets traction. Before anyone believes him. Grant hesitated. You mean fabricate more? Morrison smiled faintly. I mean, protect the university. And just like that, the cover-up began again. Evelyn and Booker didn't know it yet, but the walls were closing in. They decided to meet Marina Chow, the grad student who'd uncovered the doctored screenshots, in a small off-campus cafe near the train station. She arrived nervous, glancing over her shoulder twice before sitting down. I shouldn't even be here, she whispered. If my department finds out, they won't, Evelyn said gently. We just need confirmation. Proof the files are real. Marina nodded, pulling a flash drive from her pocket. I pulled metadata from the cloud backup logs. Grant's credentials were used to modify Lyles's thesis in April 2011. But the file was uploaded using Dean Morrison's admin pass. Booker froze. Wait, he uploaded it? Yes, Marina said. And not just that, he submitted the paper to the Journal of Theoretical Mathematics under Grant's name 3 weeks later. I found the submission logs in the email archive. Booker exhaled slowly, anger trembling beneath calm. He didn't just steal it, he published it for profit. Marina nodded. The university used that publication to secure a multi-million-dollar STEM grant the next year. It's in their annual report. Evelyn's hand went to her mouth. Dear God. Booker leaned back, staring at the ceiling. My whole life fell apart so they could get funding. Marina swallowed hard. I wanted to help. Because I know what it's like to be invisible here. Evelyn touched her hand. You did the right thing, child. Marina's eyes glistened. Then do something with it. Don't let them bury it again. Back in Evelyn's home office, the three of them worked like investigators piecing together a cold case, files cross-checked, publication dates verified, names aligned. Booker stared at the printed copy of Grant's paper, now annotated with red circles and arrows. Every one of these equations, he said, tapping the page, was mine. Even the mistakes. Look here, see that missing coefficient? I corrected that in my original version. Grant left it wrong. He copied my draft. Evelyn nodded. Then we have irrefutable proof. Proof doesn't matter to people who already decided I'm a liar, Booker said quietly. Evelyn's gaze hardened. It will when the right eyes see it. She turned to Marina. You know anyone in the press? Marina hesitated. A few in tech journalism. But if you want academic weight, you'll need to hit them where it hurts. The journals, the ones that published the lie. Evelyn smiled grimly. Then we'll make them eat their own footnotes. Before they could act, Booker received an email from Mr. Lyles. The university is proceeding with your termination effective immediately. You are found in violation of campus conduct for unauthorized use of facilities and falsification of academic materials. The timing was surgical. Right as he uncovered the truth, they erased him again. He stared at the email in disbelief. They fired me. Evelyn closed her eyes. Of course they did. They're covering their tracks. Booker laughed bitterly. They're faster this time. Guess they've had practice. Evelyn put a hand on his shoulder. Let them dig. We'll bury them with evidence. The next morning, Evelyn printed every document, every timestamp, every comment, and assembled it into a single file. The Lyles dossier. She slipped it into a large envelope, sealed it, and stared at the address label. Editorial board, Journal of Theoretical Mathematics. Then she typed an email. Subject: ethics concern regarding past publication. She attached the stolen paper, the original thesis, the metadata logs, and the screenshots of the tracked edits. But she hesitated. The mouse hovered over send. Booker watched from across the table. You sure? Evelyn looked at him. If we do this, there's no going back. He nodded slowly. I lost everything once already. I've got nothing left to lose. She met his eyes, a flash of motherly pride breaking through her calm. Then let's give them something they can't ignore. Her finger clicked. The email flew into cyberspace, a digital bullet aimed at an empire built on lies. Hours passed. Silence. No response. Booker paced the living room, muttering equations under his breath just to keep from collapsing. Evelyn sat by the window, sipping cold tea, watching the rain fall in narrow, perfect lines. Finally, her phone buzzed. A reply from the editorial board. Dr. Trask, thank you for your correspondence. The journal is currently reviewing your claim. However, given the passage of time and the author's established reputation, our ability to take action may be limited. Evelyn read it aloud. Voice heavy. Booker scoffed. Translation. They won't touch him. Not yet, she murmured. But they just admitted it's under review. That's enough. Booker frowned. Enough for what? For a headline, she said, opening her laptop. Because once this becomes public, they'll have to act. 2 days later, a campus-wide email arrived. Statement from the office of the dean. The university is aware of false and defamatory rumors circulating about our faculty. We stand by Professor Elliot Grant's exemplary academic record and contributions. We urge the community to refrain from spreading misinformation. Booker's phone buzzed non-stop. Texts, calls, even voicemails from unknown numbers. Some mocked, some threatening. But one message stood out. From an unknown contact. You don't know me, but I used to work in the journal's editorial office. You were right. Your thesis was plagiarized. We found the submission record, but we can't say this publicly yet. Be ready. Booker showed Evelyn. She smiled slowly. The walls are cracking. That night, as thunder rolled outside, Evelyn sat alone at her desk, rereading the correspondence. She thought about her career, the years of silence, of swallowing her anger, of pretending respectability was protection. Now watching Booker fight the same machine that chewed her up, she realized this wasn't just about him. It was about every forgotten name erased from history, because it didn't fit the narrative. She clicked open the plagiarized paper again. Grant's name glared at her from the header, smug and untouched. She selected the file, attached it to a new email, addressed it not to the journal this time, but to every major academic outlet, investigative journalist and ethics committee contact she had ever collected. The subject line was short, sharp, surgical. You missed one. She hit send. The rain outside turned to thunder. And somewhere in the heart of the university, a server light blinked, processing the beginning of an academic reckoning. Evelyn closed her laptop and exhaled. The deed was done, but in the stillness that followed, a ping echoed from her inbox, an automated reply.
This message has been flagged for review by university security.
Her eyes widened. They were already watching, and the war had just gone public. The headline dropped at 8:03 a.m. on a Monday morning. By 8:09, it had over 12,000 shares. Black janitor outsmarts top university. Plagiarism scandal exposes Ivy cover-up. The article, published by the Chronicle of Higher Education, featured a side-by-side comparison, Booker Lyles' 2010 thesis versus Elliott Grant's 2011 publication. Circled equations, identical phrases, matching models, and a timeline that made it impossible to ignore. Booker Lyles had been erased. And now he had been unerased. The internet reacted like it had been electrocuted. Twitter X, Reddit, LinkedIn, Instagram, even TikTok. Every platform pulsed with Booker's name. Some dubbed him the math martyr. Others called him the ghost genius. But the one that stuck came from a podcast title. The janitor who solved what academia couldn't. Within 48 hours, his inbox exploded. Interview requests, podcast invites, speaking engagements, TED Talks, panels, radio, CNN, NPR, BBC, Al Jazeera. Everyone wanted the man who'd mopped floors and solved equations in secret for a decade. Everyone wanted Booker Lyles. The first time he saw himself on TV, it didn't feel real. He was sitting in Evelyn's living room, couch sagging under stacks of paperwork and half-eaten takeout, when the local news aired the story. Once just a quiet janitor at Midland State, Booker Lyles has become a viral symbol of stolen potential and systemic silencing. But who is he really? And how did a plagiarized thesis stay hidden for over a decade? The segment cut to photos of Grant, then to grainy footage of Booker from the math symposium, then back to Evelyn's email, now public. You missed one. Booker didn't blink. Evelyn whispered, "They're finally listening." He exhaled. Now they're watching. But with fame came a different kind of pressure. The story had outpaced him. He couldn't control how it was told, who twisted it, or what angle they spun for clicks. Some celebrated him. This is what anti-black gatekeeping looks like. A modern-day hidden figure. The system tried to bury him. Didn't know he was a seed. Others didn't. I bet he barely passed high school. Janitors shouldn't be in lecture halls. This whole story is staged. Bet the woman coached him. Affirmative action in disguise. He's just a glorified TikTok math nerd. Booker tried not to read the comments, but they came anyway. On his feed, in his email, even through anonymous voicemails. Some were just cruel. Others were terrifying. Stay in your place. You're not one of us. Try solving this equation. 9mm pause forehead, he is silence. Evelyn reported the threats. The police took a statement. The university said nothing. They're watching the fire burn, Booker said one night. They just don't want to be blamed for the match. Despite the chaos, he said yes to one interview. Just one. Truth Table. A long-form academic podcast. No fluff, just facts. The host, a middle-aged black man named Roland Deeks, greeted Booker with a handshake and a whisper. They can't edit truth out of your mouth, brother. The interview was raw. No pre-approved questions. No PR buffer. Roland leaned in. When did you first realize they stole your work? Booker hesitated. When I stopped pretending they were going to fix it. Who's they? He stared into the mic. The people who smile in your face but put a knife in your name. Roland's voice dropped. You're not scared to say that out loud? Booker exhaled. I've already lived through the worst of silence. Speaking is the only freedom left. The episode reached #1 on Spotify's education charts within 20, and in that moment, for the first time, Booker felt seen, not as a story, not as a symbol, but as a man who had survived the burning of his own future. 2 days later, an unexpected email arrived. Subject: confidential offer, Harvard Institute of Mathematical Sciences. Booker opened it slowly. Dear Mr. Lyles, we have followed recent developments and are impressed by your resilience and intellect. We believe your story, while unconventional, represents a breakthrough in recognizing hidden genius. We would like to offer you a visiting scholar fellowship at Harvard Institute of Mathematical Sciences. This includes housing, a $125,000 stipend, and full access to research labs, conferences, and lectures. However, in the spirit of moving forward, we ask that you agree to the following conditions. No public commentary on previous plagiarism allegations. No legal action against prior institutions. No affiliation with activist organizations during fellowship tenure. We hope you understand our desire to preserve academic neutrality. Sincerely, Dr. Caleb Vickers, Director. Booker stared at the screen. Everything he'd once dreamed of. Harvard, labs, recognition, laid out in clean bullet points. And yet, it was dipped in bleach. A sanitized, neutered version of his legacy.
Move forward, they said.
But only if he left truth behind. He forwarded the email to Evelyn. She called immediately. You good? He didn't answer for a moment. Then, they want the miracle, but not the mess. She breathed in sharply. They want the genius without the injustice. The story without the stain. He whispered. They want me to be safe for them. Yes. Booker stared out the window, rain tracing down glass like timelines he never got to live. Should I take it? Evelyn paused. Do you want to be seen in their house? Or build one where others like you can walk in the front door? He didn't answer. Because deep down, he didn't know yet. That night, Twitter X caught wind of the job offer. A leaked screenshot from a source close to Harvard made the rounds. The comments were split like a scalpel. He deserves this. This is reparations in real time. He better take it in STFU already. Watch. He'll mess it up. Always do. Wonder what they offered to silence him.
Booker shut off his phone.
He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the hum of the city outside mocking the quiet war inside him. They were offering him the world, but only if he erased the path that got him there. In the morning, another package arrived at his door. No return label. Inside, a framed photograph. It was him, from the symposium stage. In chalk-covered boots, mid-solve, head tilted toward the board. Below the image, scrawled in handwritten pen, "Don't let them crop the truth out of your picture." Booker stared at it for a long time, then turned to his laptop. He opened the email draft to Dr. Caleb Vickers. Typed. Deleted. Typed again. Finally, he stopped, took a breath and wrote, Dr. Vickers, thank you for your offer. I appreciate the recognition, truly, but the price you're asking isn't neutrality. It's erasure. I was never just a story. I was a warning. I was a reflection of what happens when institutions value control over truth. If I come to Harvard, it will be with my full story, not the redacted version. If that's not acceptable, then I wish you well. Respectfully, Booker Lyles. He hit send. And the silence that followed was freedom. That afternoon, Evelyn walked into Booker's apartment, holding a manila folder. I got something, she said, eyes burning. He opened it. Inside, an internal whistleblower memo from the Journal of Theoretical Mathematics. A source had leaked it to her. The journal had voted 5-2 in favor of retraction. Grant's paper was coming down. But the real twist was in the fine print. An investigation is now open into patterns of racial bias in past submissions, starting with the Grant Lyles case. Evelyn looked up at him. They didn't just steal from you, she whispered. They stole from others too. And the fight wasn't over. It was just beginning. The second envelope arrived less than 48 hours after Booker's email to Harvard. This time, it wasn't digital. It came by courier. A sleek black folder inside a cream envelope embossed with the crest of another Ivy League giant, Westbridge University. Inside, a printed job offer. The terms were clear, cleaner than anything he'd ever read. We are thrilled to invite Mr. Booker T. Lyles to join the Department of Mathematical Sciences at Westbridge University. As a distinguished scholar in residence, annual compensation, housing provided, tenure track status considered upon annual review. It was more than just a job. It was validation, the kind he had been denied for over a decade. But there was a second page, and it wasn't quite so generous. Mr. Lyles agrees to refrain from public commentary on ongoing or past legal disputes involving former institutions. Mr. Lyles agrees that all future public speaking, media engagements, and academic publications will be coordinated with Westbridge PR. Mr. Lyles agrees to represent Westbridge in a manner consistent with our values of civility, inclusivity, and institutional harmony. Civility, inclusivity, harmony. 3 words that sounded good and reeked of censorship. Booker reread them slowly. The message wasn't hidden. It was bold and plain. Come here. Be brilliant. But be quiet. He showed the contract to Evelyn the next morning. She didn't even finish page 2 before her hand slammed onto the table. This isn't an offer, she said. It's a muzzle. Booker exhaled. It's also the first time anyone's ever offered me a place where I'm not wiping chalk dust off someone else's floor. I get that, she said. Believe me. But don't confuse access with acceptance. He rubbed his temples. It's tempting, Evelyn. Real tempting. To finally teach. To finally be seen. You won't be seen, she snapped. You'll be shown. Like a museum exhibit. Look at our inspirational hire. Look at what we're doing for the poor, brilliant black janitor. He was silent. Do you know what they're offering you? She pressed. He didn't answer. She leaned in, voice lower. A cage, made of compliments. Polished with money. Padded with prestige. Booker looked up slowly. And what do I do? Walk away? Again. She softened. Not walk away. But don't walk in unless it's on your terms. That evening, Booker stood in his apartment alone, the envelope still on the table. Outside, the city buzzed. Inside, silence. He thought about every night he'd cleaned rooms full of half-finished equations. Every student who glanced past him like furniture. Every moment he had wanted to scream. I know the answer. I see what you missed. And now they were inviting him to the front of the room. But not his version. Not his voice. Just the version they could sell. He stared at the contract, then picked up a pen. The next morning, Booker arrived at Evelyn's doorstep with the folder. She opened it, eyes scanning the top sheet. You signed? He nodded. I did. She looked stunned. Booker. Wait, he said. Look at page 4. She turned to it, her brow furrowed. Halfway down the page, in black ink, a single line, handwritten between clauses. Westbridge acknowledges Mr. Lyles retains full rights to publish a personal memoir or public statement without prior institutional approval. Ellen looked up, stunned. How did you? They gave me a PDF, he said, but I asked for a printed version. Told them I don't sign digital documents on principle. And they sent it? With a blank signature line. I added a clause, signed it, scanned it back. Booker. They signed it without noticing. The moment the headline hit about Grant's paper being retracted, they just wanted my name on their faculty page. Evelyn blinked. You tricked them. I gave them a math problem, he said, eyes sharp, and they didn't solve it. It took 2 weeks for the hire to go public. Westbridge University announces historic appointment of Booker T. Lyles. The press release painted him as a hero of intellect, a symbol of resilience, a proof that the American dream was still alive, just delayed. But nowhere in the statement was the word racism. Nowhere. Plagiarism. Nowhere. Injustice. Just brilliance. Talent and overcoming obstacles. Booker smiled bitterly at the page. Obstacles, he muttered. Is that what they call institutional theft now? The PR machine didn't want a reckoning. It wanted a redemption arc, without accountability. Still, Booker took the position. He moved to the campus, took the key to a small but sleek faculty apartment. Stepped into a pristine office with fresh carpet and polished glass. But on the walls, no pictures, no accolades, just silence. On his first day, he walked into the lecture hall, wearing jeans, a black button-up, and the same shoes he used to mop floors in. He stood at the front of a classroom filled with graduate students, most of them white, most of them staring like they weren't sure if this was a guest speaker or a mistake. He let the silence hang. Then he picked up a piece of chalk and wrote, in big block letters, I am not your inspiration. I am your instructor. Then turned to the class. Any questions? That same week, Evelyn sent him another envelope. Inside, a note handwritten on crisp paper. They let you in. Now show them why they should have feared keeping you out. E.T. Beneath the note was something else. A first draft cover page. Swept away the stolen genius of Booker Lyles. A memoir. He stared at it for a long time. Then smiled. But the university's grip tightened fast. 2 weeks into his tenure, Booker received a soft warning from the Office of Communications. We noticed your social media includes commentary about past academic injustices. While we respect freedom of expression, we encourage alignment with Westbridge's mission of forward-looking scholarship. Translation: don't talk about what happened. 3 days later, a student emailed him directly. Dear Professor Lyles, I admire your story, but in class you seem hostile to questions. Some of us feel like we're being judged before we open our mouths. Booker read it 3 times. then replied once. Some of you are just experiencing for the first time what it feels like to not be presumed right. Then came the donor dinner. A black tie affair with wine glasses clinking and faux admiration dripping from every handshake. Booker, we're just thrilled to have you here, one white alumnus said, grinning. You're proof that intellect knows no background. Another added, you must have had a hell of a teacher back then, huh? Booker laughed. I did. But she wasn't the one who stole my thesis and put their name on it. The smiles faded. The next course was served in icy silence. Afterward, Evelyn called. They're watching you, she said. They've always watched me, he replied. They just used to pretend I wasn't there. Be careful. I'm not here to play safe, he said. I'm here to play smart. 1 week later, Booker held his first public seminar. A campus-wide event titled, When Brilliance is Buried, Race, Theft, and the Quiet Censorship of Black Thought in Academia. Students packed the hall. Faculty too. The provost sat in the back, arms folded, lips pursed. Booker stood at the mic and told his story. Unfiltered, unapologetic, unredacted. He named names. Described the paper, the theft, the cover-up. Then he said, there is no formula that can solve systemic racism, but there are variables we refuse to acknowledge. And I was one of them, until I refused to be. The crowd gave a standing ovation, except the provost. 2 days later, Booker received a memo. Your future events must align with the educational goals of the university. Personal grievances are best handled in private forums. He printed it, folded it, slipped it into his desk, and wrote another chapter of his memoir. At the end of the semester, as Booker packed up his office for winter break, he received a letter in his campus mailbox. No stamp, no return address. Inside, a flash drive, one file, titled, Lyles Grant Dept Fraud.te. He plugged it in, opened it. Dozens of internal emails between faculty members. One line stood out, dated If this Lyles situation resurfaces, we'll say Evelyn coached him. He's uncredentialed, easy to discredit. No one will believe he wrote it. Signed, Elliot G. Booker stared at the screen. The chains they gave him weren't new. They were just polished. But now, he had the key. The auditorium lights dimmed. Cameras clicked softly in the back rows. Laptops glowed. Every seat was filled. They called it a special lecture, but the whispers said otherwise. Lyles is about to shake the table. Booker stood at the chalkboard, silent for a moment, surveying the crowd. No suit, no tie, just a black wool sweater, and the same boots he'd worn in the janitor's closet for years. His presence alone was the protest. In the front row sat Evelyn, arms folded, eyes locked on him like a lighthouse. To her left, Marina Chow. To her right, 2 visiting professors from MIT and Columbia. Behind them, faculty from Westbridge, faces cautious, expectant, suspicious. And streaming live on academic webcasts across the country were hundreds more watching, waiting, wondering what the janitor-turned-professor was about to do. Booker took a breath and wrote a single phrase on the board. Recursive quantization error, across infinite variables. QE. Then he turned and said quietly, what you're about to see will not only challenge a long-accepted model, it will replace it. The room leaned in. He began. 30 years ago, a theory was published that shaped nearly every predictive data system in our modern framework. It dealt with recursive limits, noise interference, and model degradation. Its assumptions were considered sound. Its authors, untouchable. The screen behind him lit up. A title appeared. Cascading Error Theory in Nonlinear Prediction Models. E. Grant. J. Hollis. Booker let the silence linger. I'm not here to attack. I'm here to correct. He turned to the board and began writing. Symbols, sequences, limits bending into curves. This is QEV, infinity, he explained. A model I've been working on since before I ever held a mop. The crowd chuckled nervously. But the core idea is simple. The current models assume error is a function of complexity. I argue that complexity itself, when quantified recursively, creates a self-correcting loop. The noise doesn't compound, it organizes. He clicked to the next slide, a simulation. 2 lines appeared, one red, one green. The red is the Grant Hollis model. The green is mine. As the simulation ran, the red line spiraled out, a chaos curve. The green, it curved, then stabilized into a repeating pattern. This is the missing variable, Booker said, not accounted for in their model. Not because it wasn't known, but because no one expected someone like me to be the one who'd see it. Murmurs rippled. Let me be clear, what you just saw disproves a foundational assumption that's gone unchallenged for decades. And it does so not with theory alone, but with tested peer-reviewed simulations run across 4 independent systems. The math holds. He paused, then delivered the final blow. And the man whose name is on that original theory. The man who called me a liar, a fraud, a janitor with delusions. That man once told me I didn't belong in his world. Today I am not knocking on his door. Booker stepped away from the board. I've redesigned the blueprint. The room exploded. Not with applause. Not yet. With shock. Whispers. Pens dropped. Fingers tapped keyboards with urgency. One student gasped. Holy shit, he just killed Grant's model. Evelyn stood slowly, then clapped once, then again. Others followed. Hesitant at first, then roaring. A standing ovation, not just for the model, but for the moment. For the undoing of a decades-old lie. For the truth finally speaking. In fluent mathematics. After the lecture, Booker walked back to his office, in silence. He didn't celebrate. He sat at his desk staring at the board he'd just erased. He didn't feel triumphant. He felt heavy. Because revenge, even when dressed in logic, still leaves bruises. He thought about all the years that formula had lived in his head, unsolved. All the nights he scrubbed toilets, while equations whispered at the back of his mind. And now, it was real. He had done what they said he couldn't. He disproved a legacy, but legacy doesn't die quietly. An hour later, the hallway outside his office erupted with raised voices. Then, a knock. The door opened. Professor Elliot Grant stepped in, hair grayer, eyes wild, face tight. In his hand, a yellow envelope.
Mr. Lyles, he said, voice acidic. I expected ego, but I didn't expect betrayal.
Booker didn't move. Grant tossed the envelope onto the desk. You've crossed a line, and now you've left me no choice. Booker opened the envelope slowly. Inside, a legal notice. Cease and desist. Defamation. Professional sabotage. Unauthorized use of confidential materials. Filed by Professor Elliot Grant. Westbridge University. Grant stepped closer, voice rising. You just accused me of academic theft in front of the entire department, on a live broadcast, with no formal lawsuit filed. That's defamation. That's slander. Booker stood, calm. You did steal from me. You have no evidence. I have emails. I have edits. I have timestamps with your initials. Grant's lip curled. You think any court is going to side with a janitor over a tenured professor? Booker's eyes sharpened. You're not just fighting me anymore. You're fighting every lie that built your reputation. And this time, your whiteboard won't save you. Grant leaned in. Enjoy your 15 minutes, Lyles. The backlash is coming. He turned to leave, paused, then added, You're smart, but you're not dangerous enough to survive what happens next. And then he was gone. Booker stared at the door for a long moment. Then down at the paper in his hand. He didn't feel fear. He felt clarity. Later that night he met Evelyn on campus. They sat on a bench near the old mathematics building, the one where it all began. She read the legal notice, then scoffed. He's scared. He should be. You realize what this means, right? She asked. You just embarrassed a cornerstone of the academic establishment, in public, and now they're going to come after your credibility. Booker nodded. Let them try. She smiled. Then we fight. The next day Booker did 2 things. First, he emailed the full QEV model to 4 international journals. Peer-reviewed math-verified, already tested by independent analysts Marina had connected him with. Second, he emailed his lawyer. The subject line was short. Let's file. Attached 18 pages of documentation. A lawsuit. Booker Lyles versus Elliot Grant. Intellectual theft, defamation, and academic misconduct. It had taken a decade, but now the chalk had been replaced with court filings. The janitor was no longer cleaning the floor. He was cleaning the system. 3 days later, as Booker arrived to teach his afternoon seminar, campus security approached. Mr. Lyles, one said, eyes down, you've been placed on temporary administrative leave. Effective immediately. Booker froze. On what grounds? They handed him a letter. Due to active litigation involving a current faculty member, Westbridge University is placing Mr. Lyles on leave pending further review. His hands tightened on the paper. As he looked up, the hallway he once walked freely now felt like a cage again. But this time he wasn't walking away. He was just getting started. The courtroom was colder than Booker expected. Not in temperature, but in energy. Marble floors. Polished oak benches. That faint echo when shoes click too loud. Every sound seemed to underline his position. A man in a space designed to keep him small. But not today. Today, Booker Lyles wasn't a janitor. He wasn't a custodian who accidentally wandered into academia. He was the plaintiff. And for the first time, the system that buried him had to look him in the eye. The plaque above the judge's bench read "Truth before power." Ellen muttered under her breath. Let's hope they mean it this time. She sat beside Booker at the plaintiff's table, her hands folded, expression steady but electric beneath the surface. Age had weathered her face, but her eyes, sharp, alive, relentless, still commanded the room. Their attorney, a young black litigator named Jordan Pike, stood tall in his tailored gray suit. He glanced between Booker and Evelyn before whispering, "They're going to come hard at your credibility. Expect it. But don't let them define your intelligence in their language. You've already proven who you are." Booker nodded slowly. "They want me to lose my temper. I won't." "Good," Jordan said. "They've underestimated you. Let's make sure they regret that." Across the aisle, the defense table gleamed with confidence. Professor Elliot Grant sat stone-faced in a navy suit, his posture perfect, hands folded on the table. Beside him, the university's counsel, a woman with ice in her eyes, and a voice like steel, sorted through thick binders of exhibits. Behind them sat Dean Morrison, pretending to look disinterested, as if the last decade of lies weren't about to be dissected in public. The clerk's voice rang out. "All rise. Court is now in session." The Honorable Judge Mendez presiding. Everyone stood. The judge, a Latina woman in her 50s with a sharp mind and an even sharper tone, looked around the room. "This is case number 24-2087, Lyles versus Westbridge University, and Elliot Grant. Allegations of intellectual property theft, racial discrimination, and defamation. Mr. Pike, you may begin." Jordan rose, buttoned his jacket, and stepped forward. "Your Honor, this is not a case about math. It's a case about erasure, about a man who built a bridge of numbers, so elegant, it frightened the very people who should have celebrated him. Instead of mentorship, he was met with malice. Instead of recognition, with silence. Instead of tenure, with termination." He turned toward the jury, 8 white faces, 3 black, 1 Latina. For over 10 years, Booker Lyles's work was stolen, buried, and paraded under another man's name. But the math didn't lie. It never does. And today we'll show you the truth, equation by equation. The defense attorney rose smoothly. "Counsel paints a dramatic picture, Your Honor. But the reality is simpler. My client, Professor Grant, is a respected academic with decades of published work. Mr. Lyles, while intelligent, was never a registered student, never a faculty member, and never produced any verifiable documentation of authorship. There is no proof a janitor could have written that thesis. This case isn't about racism. It's about resentment." Her words landed like quiet grenades. Booker didn't flinch, but Evelyn's jaw tightened. The judge's gavel tapped lightly. "We'll see what the evidence says. Proceed." For the first 2 days, the defense dominated. They brought in experts, older white mathematicians who spoke in heavy jargon and dismissive tones. They praised Grant's original contributions, dismissing Booker's findings as derivative. One witness even said it's statistically improbable that someone without formal graduate training could derive recursive algorithms of that complexity without guidance. Ellen whispered to Booker, "Translation, they can't believe you did it because it doesn't fit their picture." He smiled faintly. "Let them underestimate me. It's my favorite variable." On the 3rd day, it was their turn. Jordan called Booker to the stand. The courtroom quieted. He swore in, then sat down, his back straight but his voice calm. "Mr. Lyles," Jordan began, "tell the court about the night you first realized your thesis was missing." Booker's voice carried with the weight of memory. "I was working late as a janitor, cleaning classrooms. I saw my old equations written on a whiteboard under someone else's name. It felt like seeing a ghost wearing your clothes." Murmurs rippled through the gallery. Jordan continued, "And when you confronted the department?" "They laughed," Booker said simply. "Said I must have seen something wrong. That a man like me didn't belong in those rooms anyway." His tone never broke, but Evelyn saw it. The tremor beneath composure. The defense attorney rose for cross-examination. "Mr. Lyles, You admit you were never officially enrolled as a PhD candidate when the supposed thesis was written. I was disenrolled after false accusations. But you had no institutional backing, no supervision, no peer review. I had a mentor, Dr. Evelyn Trask. She smirked. The same Dr. Trask who was dismissed from the university? Ellen whispered, careful, under her breath. Booker smiled. Yes. The same one who saw what none of you did. Mr. Lyles, what proof do you have that you wrote those equations, and not Professor Grant? He paused. Looked at the jury. Because I can still solve them. The attorney hesitated, thrown off. Excuse me? The judge raised an eyebrow. Mr. Lyles, are you suggesting a live demonstration? Yes, Your Honor. If they question my authorship, let me show them what the author knows. The next day, the courtroom transformed. A large easel board and markers stood beside the witness stand. The judge allowed the request under one condition. The defense could choose the problem. Grant himself approached the stand, smirking. Let's see if memory lasts as long as bitterness. He wrote an equation across the board. Intentionally complex, nonlinear recursion, triple variables, and a theoretical boundary limit. Even the juror's eyes glazed. He stepped back. If you can solve that, Mr. Lyles, I'll apologize publicly. Booker studied it. For a full minute, no sound, just the soft creak of the ceiling fan. Then slowly, he began. Symbols flowed from his hand, smooth and sure. He wrote not as if solving, but as if remembering. The pattern curved, reversed, mirrored. The kind of work that looked like music in numbers. Minutes passed. Then silence. Booker stepped back. The defense attorney frowned. And what exactly have you proven? Booker tapped the final expression. That the limit of this function collapses at a fixed point. Something your original 1994 paper missed. Because you treated error as independent, instead of iterative. Grant's jaw tightened. That's wrong? Booker finished for him. Then explained the stability in the derivative. It converges, not diverges. Grant froze. The courtroom murmured. Jordan whispered, you just dismantled his career in 6 lines. The judge called for recess. Reporters outside swarmed. Mr. Lyles, did you plan that demonstration? He shook his head. I didn't plan to prove anything. I just solved the problem in front of me. And that became the headline. Math as justice. Booker Lyles turns courtroom into classroom. By the 5th day, the balance had shifted. Jordan called Evelyn Trask to the stand. Dr. Trask, you mentored Mr. Lyles, correct? Yes. You reviewed his thesis before it disappeared? Yes. I still have the original copy. The defense objected, claiming it was irrelevant. The judge overruled. Jordan handed her a folder. Please identify this document. She smiled faintly. This is Booker's original thesis draft. Handwritten notes, equations, even my margin comments. And what's different about it compared to Professor Grant's published version? She pointed at the projected comparison on the screen. Everything except the name. Gasps filled the courtroom. The defense attorney stood, voice hard. Dr. Trask, isn't it true you have a personal vendetta against the university for your dismissal? Ellen met her gaze. I have a vendetta against injustice. If the university had stood by its ethics instead of its ego, we wouldn't be here. The room fell silent again. The judge finally said, move on, counsel. Later during cross, Grant's own arrogance cracked. Professor Grant, Jordan began, pacing. You testified that your work was original. Yes. Then explain these tracked changes. He displayed the infamous document on the projector. Grant swallowed. That file was a draft, not final. With Booker Lyles' name on it, it was a formatting issue. And the metadata showing you edited it on April 3, 2011 using Dean Morrison's admin credentials was that a formatting issue too. Grant's silence was deafening. Jordan let it hang. No further question. But they had one last card. They brought in a white-haired mathematician from Yale as their expert witness. His resume glittered with titles. He leaned into the mic, condescending smile barely disguised. While Mr. Lyles clearly possesses talent, his so-called model lacks the depth and proof rigor of academic research. Genius is commendable, but unverified claims are still unverified. There is no empirical evidence this janitor produced such work independently. The word janitor landed heavy. The courtroom went still. Evelyn's knuckles whitened. Booker didn't speak, but Jordan stood, voice calm. No further cross at this time. Then turned toward Evelyn. Dr. Trask, could you assist the court one more time? The judge frowned as Evelyn rose from her seat, not to the witness stand but to the center of the room. Behind her an aide wheeled in a massive chalkboard, green, old, dusted with faint ghost equations. Evelyn faced the Yale expert. "You question his authorship," she said evenly. "You question his ability to think beyond your comfort zone. So let's do what academics are supposed to do." She picked up a stick of chalk and held it out to the expert. "Prove him wrong," she said. "Solve his equation." The courtroom gasped. Booker leaned back in his chair, a quiet smile forming. For once the burden of proof wasn't on him. It was on them. The chalkboard still held the final equation, untouched. The Yale expert never made it past the first line. He stared at the math for 2 minutes, then quietly set the chalk down. He cleared his throat, looked toward the jury, and said what the academic world rarely admits out loud. I cannot solve it." A murmur rippled through the courtroom like a shockwave. Evelyn stood tall beside the board, eyes fixed on the witness, daring him to try again. But Booker didn't gloat. He didn't flinch. He simply sat back, his silence louder than any victory speech. Because that was it. The myth had collapsed. The system that insisted a black janitor couldn't lead discovery had just failed its own test in public, under oath, live-streamed across every academic forum. It was over. 3 days later, the verdict came. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. On the claim of intellectual property theft, guilty. On the claim of racial discrimination, guilty. On the claim of defamation, guilty. Booker Lyles was awarded $12.4 million in damages, including punitive compensation for career loss, emotional harm, and institutional misconduct. The courtroom didn't erupt. It didn't have to. The verdict landed like a thunderclap in every corner of academia. Elliot Grant's name was stripped from 3 journals before sunset. The university issued a cold, carefully worded apology. Dean Morrison quietly retired. The Journal of Theoretical Mathematics published an unprecedented retraction statement. "We failed, not just ethically, but mathematically." But Booker didn't smile. Not yet. Because even with the win, redemption wasn't a gift. He had to take it. He declined every talk show, skipped every news outlet request. Instead, he took a bus to the south side of the city, back to the middle school he once mopped in his 20s, where teachers still remembered his face, but had never known his name. He walked through the halls, now faded with age, and budget cuts. Bulletin boards curled at the corners. A cracked trophy case sat near the front office, filled with second-place ribbons. He asked to see the principal. She was confused at first. "Booker Lyles?" she said, flipping through her schedule. "Are you the one they're talking about on the news?" "I'm just here to ask one question," he said softly. "Do you have a math program?" She laughed. Genuinely. "A math program. We're lucky if the AC works." He nodded once. "Okay, then I'll build one." 6 months later, the Lyles Institute for Mathematical Access opened its doors. Just space. Space to think, to learn, to be brilliant without permission. He leased a worn-down rec center, rewired the computer lab himself, bought whiteboards, calculators, books, hired instructors who weren't just qualified, but believed in the kids walking through the doors. No test to get in, only curiosity. The first day, 30 kids showed up. Most had never seen a black man in a math classroom who wasn't being escorted out. Booker stood in front of them, not as a myth, but as a mirror. He didn't talk about his lawsuit, or the millions, or the scandal. He picked up a dry erase marker, drew a circle on the board, and said, "This is a sphere. This is how light bends. This is where stars are born." A kid in the front raised his hand. "But I thought we were doing math." Booker smiled. "We are. You just didn't know math looked like you." The program exploded. Local parents volunteered. Retired engineers donated supplies. A black tech entrepreneur offered to fund expansion. Letters arrived from across the country. Students, teachers, janitors, prisoners, professors. "Thank you. You made me feel seen." Booker answered every one, because every letter was a story. Every story was proof he wasn't alone. One day, while walking the hallway of the new second campus, a boy trailed behind him, 8 years old, hoodie too big, quiet as shadow. Booker stopped and turned. "You all right?" The kid looked up slowly, then "I want to be just like you." The words weren't loud, but they were heavy. Booker knelt down. "Eye level." "No," he said softly. "I want you to be better." The boy blinked. Booker pointed to the classroom. Go in there and show them. At night, Booker sometimes sat in the office alone, lights off, listening to the sound of chairs scraping floors and kids laughing. He thought about the courtroom, the chalkboard, Evelyn, the lie that had stolen 10 years of his life. Just resolve. Because now he wasn't fighting for his name. He was building a world where no one would ever have to fight for theirs. Meanwhile, academia reeled. Westbridge's internal report leaked. More than a dozen cases were identified. Students of color whose work had been minimized, miscredited, or mysteriously lost. Evelyn's name came up again and again. So did a pattern of quiet dismissals. The scandal became a reckoning. Universities began reevaluating tenure policies. A national panel was formed to address racial bias in research credit.
The damage was real.
But the shift had started. Not because Booker demanded it, but because he had forced them to see the cost of ignoring brilliance. One night, Evelyn visited the new STEM center. She walked through the halls, watching kids build robot arms and solve matrices on touchscreens. Her eyes glistened. She found Booker in the back room, fixing a broken 3D printer. "You did it," she whispered. He looked up, grease on his hands. "No, we did," she smiled. "You ever gonna hang your degrees on the wall?" He laughed. "Don't have one, remember? Then frame the court verdict." "Nah," he said. "Let the kids write their own equations." At the grand opening of the third location, Booker stood at the podium. Crowds of students, teachers, parents, media. He wore no suit, just a sweater and a smile. He tapped the mic. "People say I won a lawsuit," he said. "But I didn't win anything. I took back what should have been mine all along." He paused. "This place isn't about revenge. It's about re-entry. About all the minds we lock out before they ever get a chance to show up." He pointed to the banner above. "Brilliance has no uniform. And if you take nothing else from my story," he finished, "take this. No one else gets to define your genius. Not tests, not titles, not gatekeepers, not even me." The crowd rose. Applause rolled like thunder. And somewhere in the back, a young girl whispered to her friend, "He talks like he's been to war." Her friend replied, "He had." After the event, Booker sat in the hallway alone for a moment. A boy approached 12, maybe 13. He carried a spiral notebook filled with hand-drawn formulas. He held it out. "I wrote my own theorem," he said shyly. "I don't think it works, but I tried." Booker flipped through the pages, nodding slowly. "It's messy." The boy looked down. "Sorry." Booker smiled. "No, messy means it's real." He handed it back. "Come to my office next week. Let's work on it together." The boy lit up. "Really?" Booker winked. "Only if you bring snacks." Later that night, as Booker locked the center doors, his phone buzzed. A new email. Subject line: urgent international conference invitation. The body was simple. "We've reviewed your QEVNN model. We believe it changes everything. We want you to keynote next year's World Mathematics Assembly in Zurich. Fully covered. Please confirm." Booker stared at the screen. He didn't move. Because the world had once told him to mop floors. Now it was asking him to rewrite its equations. The plaque above the grand lecture hall door read, "The Booker T. Lyles Center for Mathematical Equity, dedicated to those whose brilliance outlived the silence that tried to erase them." The building was new, glass-framed, solar-lit, humming with energy. But it sat on the same campus where Booker once mopped chalk dust in the dead of night. Now, it bore his name. Inside, every seat was full. Professors from across the world, former students now running their own departments, young scholars clutching notepads with nervous hope. In the front row, Evelyn Trask sat with a cane across her lap, eyes gleaming with a pride she wore like armor. Marina Chow beside her, now a tenured statistician. To their left, a group of students from the Lyles Institute, some as young as 10, legs swinging off the chairs, staring wide-eyed at the man they'd grown up hearing about. A banner above the stage read, "Woime Keynote Lecture, Zurich to Westbridge, The Journey of One Equation." Then he walked in. Booker Lyles. No suit, no briefcase, just a slate gray sweater, pressed slacks, and the calm presence of a man who no longer needed to prove anything. He walked to the board, the crowd already standing. Applause thundering, not for celebrity, but for survival, not for the myth, but for the man. When the applause faded, Booker picked up the chalk, and without a word, he wrote the same equation from all those years ago, the one that started everything. QEV. Recursive quantization error across infinite variables. The equation they once tried to erase. The one that earned him mockery, suspicion, silence. The one they swore he couldn't have written. Now it was etched into textbooks, referenced in journals, taught in undergrad theory modules from Berkeley to Lagos. Now it was his again. He turned to the audience. When I first wrote this, he said quietly, it was alone, in a room, not meant for me. On a whiteboard I wasn't supposed to touch. Soft laughter rippled through the crowd. I didn't write it to change the world. I wrote it because I needed to prove something. To myself. That the part of me they couldn't see still existed. He paced slowly, chalk still in hand. They told me I wasn't allowed to be here. Not just this school, everywhere. In classrooms, in conferences, in the conversation. He paused. But math doesn't care who you are. Math doesn't flinch at race or resume. Math only asks one question. Does it work? A murmur of agreement from the crowd. He looked down, then back up. And if the answer is yes, no one can take that away from you. He set the chalk down, sat on the edge of the table, spoke now not as a scholar, but as the kid he used to be. You all know my story. You've read the articles, the lawsuit, the drama. But here's what I want you to remember. He raised a hand. There are more of me. Kids cleaning hotel rooms, answering phones, coding in public libraries, solving equations on napkins during their breaks. We're not rare. We're just not recognized. Silence fell again, this time not out of respect but reflection. Booker continued, voice steady. Brilliance doesn't show up in gowns and grants. It shows up in curiosity, in defiance, in people who solve problems because they can't help it. He stood again, walking back to the board. And when the system says you don't belong, he placed a hand gently on the equation. You write anyway. The standing ovation this time was longer. Tears. Shouts. Even a few students from the front row climbed onto their chairs, clapping like their lives depended on it. And in a way they did. Because for every black student who had been overlooked, dismissed, or assumed average until proven exceptional, Booker's presence wasn't just a victory. It was a map. Afterward, as the crowd thinned and handshakes turned into selfies and autograph requests, Booker stayed behind. He liked it quiet after the storm. He walked back to the chalkboard, looked at the equation, the curve of the infinity symbol, the way the variables balanced in their defiance of collapse. He smiled. He didn't erase it. Not this time. Oh, one did. Then he heard it. The soft rhythmic sweep of a broom. At first it didn't register, just a distant sound, but it kept going. Closer. He turned around, and there he was, pushing a janitor's cart, gray uniform, head low, slow strokes on the edge of the floor near the back of the room. Elliot Grant, older, thinner. The color in his face faded with time. His name was no longer on any research, no longer cited. His honorary degrees revoked, his tenure stripped, and now, he was sweeping the very room named after the man he tried to erase. Booker didn't speak at first. Neither did Grant. Just the hush between them. Then Booker walked over. Calm. Control. He stopped a few feet away. Grant looked up slowly. His eyes were tired. Not from labor but from loss. For a second he opened his mouth. Booker raised a hand. No, he said softly. Let me speak. Grant closed his lips again. Booker glanced at the board, then back to him. You know, I used to think beating you meant I had to become you. That to prove I belonged, I had to outpublish you, outperform, outspeak. He shook his head. But I didn't. He stepped closer. All I had to do was last. Grant blinked. No venom. No pride. Just the silence of a man who understood too late. Booker added, you had the system. I had the truth. You had the podium. I had the floor. And now, he gestured around. I built my own room. Grant looked down. I never said thank you, he whispered. Booker nodded. You never had to. He walked past him, toward the door, paused, then said over his shoulder, but you will say it to the kids. Outside, the sun was setting over the quad. Orange light spilled through the trees. Students lingered on benches, discussing theorem proofs, like they were poems. Booker stood alone for a second, watching, breathing. He didn't feel revenge. He felt release. Not because Grant had fallen, but because he had risen without him. 3 months later, a new class entered the Lyles Institute, the motto still on the wall. Brilliance has no uniform. Booker taught a new course. Now ethics and mathematical legacy. It wasn't about formulas. It was about credit. He stood in front of the board and asked, "Who gets to own ideas?" One student raised their hand. The person who had it. He smiled. Sometimes. But also the person who fought for it. By year's end, his memoir became required reading at over 120 universities. Proof of existence, the Booker Lyles story. And in its final chapter he wrote, "They taught me that justice is linear, slow, patient, procedural, but I learned that justice is exponential. It multiplies when seen, it compounds when shared, and it ignites when someone decides their silence is too expensive to maintain." On the last day of the semester, Booker returned to the original classroom. The one where it began. Still dusty. Still old. But now, hanging above the whiteboard. Sight of the first Lyles model. He smiled. Then, with one last piece of chalk, he rewrote the same equation. QEV. He looked out at the empty chairs. Not empty. Waiting. Because stories don't end. They echo. As Booker turned to leave the room, the door creaked open. A student, maybe 16, stood there, clutching a spiral notebook. "Mr. Lyles?" Booker turned. "Yes?" The kid stepped forward, shy. "I solved something last night, and I think it's new, but it looks messy." Booker smiled. "Messy means you're close." The kid looked down. "My teacher said it doesn't make sense. Said it's not real math." Booker chuckled. "Neither was mine. Until the world caught up." He gestured to the board. "Come write it down." And just like that, another story began. If you've ever been overlooked, silenced, or told you don't belong, this story was for you. Because talent has no uniform, and justice doesn't come easy. But when the truth speaks loud enough, it can't be erased. Type yes if you believe brilliance deserves to be seen. Subscribe if this broke your heart and healed it too.